Good morning. It's Monday, May the 27th. It is exactly 9 a.m. in the UK. There is no saying what the next hour or so is going to be like. Anybody could pop up for a little chat because it's going to be one of those sort of shows. I love spontaneity. I think it's so important.
The sun is rising, the sky is blue. Good morning, grand risings. Let's see what's new. It's the time of day for Sonia and crew. Good morning, grand risings. It's time to wake up with Sonia Poulton.
We got some right sarky people in the live chat. Oh yes, we have.
Cup of coffee in hand, starting fresh with the beans. Hey, yeah. Wake up, sleepy heads, and shake off those dreams. Good morning, grand risings. It's time to wake up with Sonia Poulton. If you want the truth, you know where to be. With Sonia and crew, where everyone's free. Good morning, grand risings. It's time to wake up with Sonia Poulton.
Good morning, beautiful people. Oh my God. It's our second year anniversary and I've started how I mean to go on. How are you all? I cannot believe that we've been doing this for 2 years. 2 years. Yes, thank you so much. Wonderful Markson for our great new second birthday intro. Thank you, Randy. Thank you all. Wonderful people. Thank you, Peter Folder, for the early super chat. How are you all? It's so lovely to have you here with me. I cannot believe this. I'm literally struggling to believe this. Welcome to the show that knows true grassroots shows are few and far between. But you have just found yourself watching one. Yes, indeed, you have. Wake Up launched 2 years ago today on May bank holiday, and here we are again. Episode 1 was on May 27th, and so I thought, let's celebrate on today's show by reviewing the last 2 years. The major stories, the ignored stories, the what the stories, murders, missing people, miscarriages of justice, net zero, climate change, UN 2030, Psy-Ops, Charlie Kirk, Epstein Fall state agendas, AI, and more. So much more. Let's reflect and appreciate how far we have come as a show. We've been attacked every which way. Enemies have tried every trick to silence me, and yet somehow we're still here and ready to celebrate our second birthday this week. This is the first time in my journalistic career when I have been entirely funded by the public. People like you, not an oligarch, not a compromised agenda in sight. And on every platform, we have grown an audience pretty much from scratch. Some of our standalone videos alone have gone into the millions. At times, Wake Up videos have more views than those with big teams and big budgets. People are sick of lavish productions with empty, repeating, samey content. We've grown from the ground up, and I'm so grateful to all of you. It might be a long show today. Then I can edit it into lots of different segments and keep everyone happy. Some people like long shows, some like shorts, and I'm happy to cater to both. So, as said, our first show was on Spring Bank Holiday 2024, May 27th. On that first show, we covered Lucy Letby. It was shortly after the general election, which brought in Starmer, and Bernd Stallander came on to talk to us on the first show about his book to do with Madeleine McCann, in which he swore he had evidence of where she was buried. He claimed to know where Madeleine was. He claimed to have picture evidence that would undeniably prove it. Still waiting, Bert. Still waiting. And in that first episode, I talked about 2030, and there's that year again. And we've continued to do that. And hey, in the UK, we're supposed to be experiencing today the hottest May Day on record. What do you think about that? Don't they tell us that a lot? Thank you so much for your super chats, you beautiful people. NCP says, but I am an oligarch. So Wake Up, as said, has grown from the ground up. I've had many offers for financial collaborations in the 2 years. I have accepted none of them so far. I will not accept money from people or organizations to flog a product that I know is unethical. I will not accept money to promote yet more inferior supplements when there are so very few I could vouch for, Clive Carl being one of them. I will not associate with people whom I know to be problematic, no matter how much I may personally like them. My good reputation is what I have, and my enemies know it, which is why they spend so much time trying to smear me, and they have failed. However, they have done a good job in highlighting themselves. And as well as our Monday news show, we have a regular Friday investigation show, which for the most part is significantly more popular than the Monday show, which tells me something. Of course, I wanted to do a Wake Up as a breakfast show because after mainstream media, which I'd spent decades in, I'd had a couple of horrible experiences with breakfast shows. But over the last 2 years, I've become less convinced about Wake Up remaining as a news show as such. And in fact, what I may do is expand Wake Up to focus on a lesser number of stories each week. But that will enable me to dig deeper on those stories that I do choose to cover. So it's a balancing act all the time. The news show enables us to cover stacks of weekly events and happenings, but the investigation appears to be largely more satisfying for people. So who knows where we'll go next? The great thing about running my own ship is I can decide today and put it into action tomorrow. I love that. I absolutely love that I don't suddenly have to go into a 5-hour-long meeting with somebody to convince them of my ideas. I could just put them into action. And it's great. And some of our deep dives, well, we've covered the Geldof, Yates and Hutchins triangle. We've covered Bono, David Attenborough, the parasitical British royal family, Dame Esther Rantzen, the death of George Michael, the weirdness of Elton John. And I covered John Cleese on Friday. And many of you said, I like John Cleese. Well, that's the beauty of Wake Up. Is I won't take a dislike to you just because you might disagree with me, because we're adults around here. We still allow for difference of opinion. I don't do deep dives just because I think that my audience will approve. I do them because I believe they need to be done. And for every person who disagrees, I am discovered by a new person who agrees with me. So it swings and roundabouts. But the bottom line is I appreciate all viewers, regardless of whether they agree with me or not. It doesn't matter. That's almost immaterial, actually. Your viewpoint matters to me. And so I've been looking into all the stats around Wake Up, our demographic. Our demographic is aged between 13 to 65. Now, these stats that I'm going to quote are taken from the YouTube Wake Up stats. So our demographic is age 13 to 65 plus. We have 50.1% females and 49.8% male and 0.1% undisclosed. How balanced is that? Almost completely 50-50 male and female. That makes me really happy. I love that. It's so important. And location, I am thrilled. We are global, kids. These are the top places that watch Wake Up, and I want to name you all, so bear with me. United Kingdom, Ireland, Australia, United States, Spain, New Zealand, Canada, Netherlands, Germany, South Africa, France, Portugal, Sweden, Thailand, Italy, Switzerland, Poland, Norway, Denmark, Albania, Belgium, Cyprus, Greece, India, Japan, Finland, Austria, Jersey, Isle of Man, Turkey, Brazil, Philippines, Czechia, Russia, Grenada, Malta, Mexico, Serbia, Chile, Singapore, Malaysia, United Arab Emirates, Middle East, Bulgaria, Hong Kong, Croatia, Argentina, Slovenia, Gibraltar, Lithuania, and Morocco. Whoa, I'm loving it. Wake Up is universal. We are family indeed. Loads of jocks here. I love you, jocks. Love you down to the ground and up to the sky. And I am absolutely delighted that we are growing organically. No flash graphics, can barely get the intro started properly. No gotchas, no major promotions, just funded by you, the people. And we've gone from very little to where we are now. So some of our figures, Wake Up on YouTube has attracted over 6.6 million views just to our main show. That doesn't include the standalones, which, as I say, are capable of attracting millions in their own right. Now, I appreciate that some people get millions per show, but they've often been going longer than I have, and they have a team. I don't. You are my team, and we are doing just great. Thank you. Yes, indeed, we are. We're all across. We're on Spotify. We're on Rumble. We're on TikTok. We're on X. 5 million views. TikTok, 2 million. So although Wake Up is me, not a team, I still see it as a we. Wake Up benefits from a substantial amount of viewer participation. You know I appreciate you people in the live chat. And our viewers contribute by writing in suggestions, sharing the show and sharing clips on social media, being a patron on Patreon, or being here in the live chat. And the live chat frequently inspires and challenges me, and I enjoy that. I even don't mind the trolls, since obviously if I was of no significance, they would spend their time focusing on people who are. And also, to be fair, my responding to my hecklers is a frequent favourite part of Wake Up viewers who love seeing me slap them down. And I kind of love it too. So thank you all for making Wake Up what it is. And we're here at such an important time. Our media, legacy media, is changing beyond everything that we've ever known previously. Over the last 2 years, mainstream media has experienced a historic shift in the collapse of legacy news monopolies. There has been an unprecedented drop in public trust. I'm sure you're shocked. Coupled with the rapid rise of an independent, creator-led digital economy. And boom, corporate media is dying, and it deserves to. Even the Reuters Institute have been forced to admit that more people now access information through social networks and independent video channels than through traditional newsrooms. We have yet to see any true justice for COVID, but one act of justice has been the further demise of trust in corporate and traditional media, a true weakening of mainstream media's power over the last 24 months. Public perception of mainstream journalism has deteriorated significantly. Audiences increasingly believe that major news networks operate with corporate or political biases, prioritizing clickbait headlines over nuance. And Ofcom News survey officially noted that digital sites and social media apps have overtaken television as the primary source of news for adults. We're not surprised that they ushered in the draconian Online Safety Act, right? They saw the increased power and the ability for people like us, like you and I, to question official narratives and other matters of public interest, and they did not like it one bit. Up to that point, mainstream media had always been a gatekeeping operation. But the truth is, people want their news and current affairs on demand when they want to watch it. Is not always tied to it being the 1 o'clock news or the 6 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news. Those days are over. Platforms like YouTube and TikTok are now functional news outlets for over half the population. That's incredible, this change in our lifetime. Traditional 20th century newsrooms have fractured beyond simple recovery. They're dying. A loss of advertising for media has resulted in an advertising boom for the tech giants. So the beneficiaries, of course, like Meta and Google, which takes away funds from local and national news outlets. And this has forced legacy outlets into severe survival measures, resulting in thousands of journalism job cuts and structural redundancies across the US and UK markets. And as said, television is no longer the single main source of news for UK adults. Ofcom research shows online sites and apps are now as popular as TV news. You know, TV news had been considered the leading source of UK news since before I was even born, since the 1960s, when widespread set ownership saw it overtake radio and newspapers. But Ofcom's own annual study into how we access news shows show that 71% of adults now do so online. That's incredible. So video sharing platforms are challenging traditional news channels, but it has to be said, TV and radio news is still generally more trusted, as Ofcom launches a review to support public news services. So even though people have lost trust in journalists, when news stories are put out by mainstream media, they are generally more trusted than those put out on alternative media, on YouTube or whatever. And that is, for the most part, they have to go through a higher degree of checking because they're more liable to being sued. It doesn't mean that what they're pushing out is true, though, either. That doesn't mean that. BBC One still rules in terms of top 10 news sources, but that's changing rapidly. And you're getting catch up from like YouTube, Instagram, and X, formerly Twitter. So there you go. More trusted? I think not. Well, the problem is that you will even see so-called alternative media use mainstream to validate what they're saying. So you only have to look at, that's the evidence. I agree with you. I don't think it's trusted at all. But actually, when mainstream put out an article that validates what an alternative thinker is thinking, they will automatically go, look, it's, you know, it's what mainstream is saying. So these are mindsets that have to be broken down. I don't make the rules. I don't make the rules. BBC brainwash people. Good morning, Summer Breeze. Live, sweet live. Thank you, Francis. Safe and effective. And Robert is talking about Huw Edwards. We'll talk about Huw Edwards. So let's have a look over the last 2 years, shall we? Do you remember it kicked off to do with Charles and Kate having cancer? Remember that story? What ever happened to all of that? And I think it's always good to be able to look back over the last period or whatever, because you can reflect on where everything's come and what they've done with their news stories that they pushed. But what it turned out was that this was a multi-fold Photoshop picture. Remember that? I just, it was extraordinary. But what it did was it kicked off a whole series of events, including Kate, and Prince William's wife, Kate Middleton, Princess Kate, however you want to see her, including her coming out in a video and saying that she has been dealing with cancer. And she revealed that she was having preventative treatment in March 2024. And she announced she had completed chemotherapy in late 2024, publicly shared that she was in remission. But that's when it all went a little bit funny, because then it turned out that she didn't have cancer. She had a pre-cancer diagnosis. And it was all very, very odd, all very weird. There were lots of rumors behind the scenes about the problems in her marriage to William and how she had an eating disorder. All of this was going on. All of this was being discussed in newsrooms. And then it was announced that Charles also had a cancer diagnosis. They were actually announced just weeks apart. And we've never known the full details of the treatment that Charles has had, but I can bet you bottom dollar he didn't have chemotherapy or any of the traditional cancer treatments, if indeed they had any at all, because it coincided with something that I'd already sort of not foretold, but because when you start to follow data and information, it's amazing. You can almost see into the future. But in 2019, I made a film called The Business of Cancer, and it talked about how the period that we're living now, 1 in 2 people will be diagnosed with cancer. And obviously absolute billions is thrown at cancer research every year. And Crook, as I like to call them, Cancer Research UK, which is the best well-funded cancer charity in the world. And we've had on before the guy who actually came up with the Race for Life format, which has made them tons of money, but they'll never acknowledge him, even though that he'd created this idea based on the fact that his father died of cancer. Anyway, a lot of this was all of the stuff that was going on with Kate and Charles was all around the idea that, you know, we're going to have this influx of cancer, but nobody was mentioning what had happened over the last 5 years, what had been introduced to us in terms of our health that could in fact be creating these problems. Now, of course, we are now finally seeing this. Still difficult because I'm still on YouTube, which I'm going to talk about shortly, and about how we're making moves away. But it's still difficult to talk about the things that I want to in terms of COVID, because YouTube is still so draconian in terms of its kind of medical misinformation policy. But we do know that finally the powers that be are starting to admit that there are certain correlations between the C19 jab and problems that people are experiencing. I've talked to doctors who have talked about turbo cancers, and all of this came at the same time as two of the most high-profile people in the world suddenly being diagnosed with cancer. We're getting played, said Francis. Normalizing cancer, says Jane Williams. Fear is not being sold anymore. They're not very good at it, are they? Safe and effective, bro. And this is exactly what I mean about my commenters, because they're completely on it. They're very savvy people. They know exactly what's going on and what has taken place. And let me just say, just to add to that thing about YouTube, it's been very difficult. It's always difficult. I have to stay inside certain lines. But I have made well, I've already started looking into it. We've already started talking to people. The idea is that we're going to create essentially a screen on my own platform, and there will be live chat there, and we will probably attach it to somewhere like Rumble, somewhere like that, which is less problematic, and you can say more, and we'll probably use that for streaming. But that is going to happen imminently. That needs to happen. We need to be able to do that. We've been too stifled, and it's not okay. It's time to make moves. Yeah. So onwards, profit making charities. Good day, peeps. A synchronized soul. So yes, there was all of that brouhaha, and then yes, Herbert, it has to happen, and that will take us much more independent to where I want to be, and I think that's important. And Danielle knows someone who passed from turbo breast cancer. She couldn't walk, died within a few months. Sorry to hear that. Yes, so I think that all of this, the whole idea of Charles and Kate having cancer and it being promoted in the way it was all the things that I've just read out from the comments. All of those things. Miss Dizzy said there is a law that makes it illegal to cure cancer or any alternative meds to cure cancer. Yes, Miss Dizzy, you're talking about the 1939 Cancer Act, which makes it illegal to actually even promote the notion that you may be able to cure or treat people. And that was set up, obviously, to protect the big pharmaceutical treatments. Simon says, hopefully Kate is not a dude. This is what I mean about such random people. Do love you people. Mr. Dunham's great-granddaughter had breast cancer. And surgery often works. Yes, problem, reaction, solution. Great-grandmother. Okay, got you. And cancer was cured decades ago, says Ange. Yeah, Ange, don't doubt any of this. And isn't it extraordinary that for all the billions that have been pumped into these cancer charities, they somehow have failed to come up with a cancer vaccine? They can create an mRNA C19 vaccine in, a cough and the blink of an eye, but nothing for cancer. So, yes, it is. TTC is not convinced about the pregnancy bump either. Yes, Dolly Files, curing cancer would be the best thing since sliced bread, but we also need to talk about what they're doing to our food, all of the forever chemicals that are in our food. And I'm going to update you on my garden because now I've got loads of stuff coming through. It's very exciting. It is very sad to Mr. Dunham, very sad indeed. So yes, wanted just to remind you of that. And I think it's also important to talk about what was a significantly major news story of 2024, because so much came from it. And I want to be clear here is that many people I know believe that Southport was a Psy-Op, and I'm going to give you reasons why they believe that. But let me just tell you the official story first of all. In July 2024, mass stabbings in Southport, UK. Axel Cabana. He murdered 3 young girls, Alice da Silva Aguirre, Elsie Stankham, and BB King, and physically injured at least 10 others. The official story that has unfolded at phase 1 of the Southport inquiry is that he entered the Heart Space in Southport, targeting a Taylor Swift themed summer holiday workshop for children. Over roughly 15 minutes, he utilized, we were told, a kitchen knife to harm the children and adults. And in January 2025, Cabana pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder and 10 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 52 years before being considered for parole. And during police searches in his parents' home where he lived, authorities discovered weapons, bomb-making materials, including ricin, and Al-Qaeda manual materials in his bedroom. The UK government commissioned a statutory inquiry to investigate how such a severe event could happen and whether it could have been avoided. The phase 1 report found that the attack was both foreseeable and avoidable, and that the perpetrator's parents were aware of his escalating fixation on violence and lethal weapons, but deliberately concealed this information from authorities to avoid him being taken into care. Public agencies, including the Counter-Extremism Prevent Programme and local social services, repeatedly missed warning signs and failed to effectively monitor his escalating behaviour over a 5-year period. And one of the reasons some people believe this is a Psy-Op is because of everything that has apparently happened and led to as a consequence of this event, including expansion of legislation and proposed major reforms. Let's talk about it, right? So the immediate aftermath of the tragedy saw widespread anger in the UK. And we were told lots of misinformation was being spread online. National unrest was sparked, violent disorder across various towns and cities. The summer 2024, what became known as the far-right riots as a consequence of Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who had only been in power for a couple of months, coming out and immediately demonizing everybody involved. But it resulted in over 1,800 arrests, over 1,100 charges, hundreds of immediate prison sentences following a fast-track judicial response. And it was really pretty awful stuff. There were violent disorders targeting mosques, asylum seeker accommodations, and emergency workers across several towns and cities. The vast majority of people protesting, and there were some people rioting, but many were protesting, is a big difference, were prosecuted, as I say, through a fast-track court process, which was intended to act as a rapid deterrent. Immediate custodial sentences typically average 2 years in prison, with individual sentences ranging from 12 months to up to 9 years. Most people were prosecuted under Section 2 of the Public Order Act 1986 for violent disorder, which carries a maximum statutory penalty of 5 years imprisonment. For the most severe cases of coordinated violence, the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, authorised charges of riot, quote unquote, under Section 1 of the Act, which carries a maximum sentence of 10 years custody. This was some shocking stuff. This showed how far Keir Starmer's government was prepared to go to silence people from asking questions that people were deeply disturbed about and needed answers to. And the riots and the protests marked a significant precedent for digital policing. Significant. You can see why some people believe this is a Psy-Op. Several individuals who did not physically participate but used social media were jailed for terms between 20 and 38 months. Defendants also faced heavier sentences when violent disorder was combined with burglary, attempted arson, or racially aggravated criminal damage. And the sudden influx of hundreds of convicted people, heavily pressured and already strained UK prison estate. And so the government brought on Operation Early Dawn, and they activated emergency contingency measures, allowing defendants to be held in police cells longer to prevent immediate overcrowding in prisons. There were early releases. The government introduced emergency measures to release certain prisoners after serving 40% of their sentence. Some prisoners far more violent than the people that they wanted to find prison space for. It was shocking stuff. We saw it all in plain sight. It was absolutely evident that the government wanted to quash dissent, wanted to quash people asking legitimate questions about immigration, legitimate questions. They should be allowed. They shouldn't be demonized and they shouldn't be criminalized. And that's what Keir Starmer did. That happened in our lifetime. Never seen anything like it. He demonized the people on the street. And I don't for a second believe that everybody out there was far right. Some are, obviously. And we shouldn't lose sight of that because far right people are dangerous. They are divisive. But Starmer went all out to criminalize and imprison innocent people. Some had just been on the sidelines watching and filming the protests, and they were criminalized. Terrible stuff. The UK obviously has drawn global attention for these criminal prosecutions, in part related to online speech, but it's a tricky one. You had people like Robert Kennedy, RFK, saying last week about on Rogan's show about how all these people have been criminalized for online behavior. That's not strictly it. There has to be something attached to it, either, some sort of disorder or whipping up racial hatred, something like that. But nonetheless, the UK has drawn global attention for criminal prosecutions, all related to free speech, largely. High-profile arrests, jail sentences for individuals. Most famously, of course, was probably this one. And I consider her a Psy-Op. And I consider her a Psy-Op, not necessarily saying what happened, because so what she did was on the day of the Southport riots, this is Lucy Connolly, of course, on the day of the Southport riots, Lucy Connolly, Northampton-based former childminder, wife of a local councillor, she tweeted about, it was horrible. It was a really disgusting, ugly, violent tweet. And she's a horrible person. I'm not a Lucy Connolly fan at all. And I do believe that she was absolutely used as a Psy-Op. She was used as a punishment and a threat to the rest of us. And she's been supported by the Daily Telegraph, Alison Pearson, Toby Young of Free Speech Union, who also runs the UK Friends of Israel with Pearson, by Dan Wootton, currently going through a civil trial of his own, by Nigel Farage, who talked about Connolly at the White House in the US. And since her release, she spent lots of time on social media, proving to everyone that she is indeed a foul-mouthed individual, desperately in need of attention. They tried to turn her into a star. They've all tried to do it, inviting her to their conferences and the poster girl for censorship. But no, I don't believe she is at all, because actually she broke the law. She incited racial hatred and she pled guilty. But there was also a real problem with a lot of the people pleading guilty when they shouldn't have pleaded guilty. They shouldn't have. And my heart goes out to people like this guy, not Lucy Connolly, people like this guy, Peter Lynch. So many victims of Starmer's punishing regime. Peter Lynch was jailed for 2 years and 8 months for what we were told was his role in a protest outside a hotel housing asylum seekers in Rotherham, South Yorkshire in August 2024. He was found dead in his cell on October the 19th, 2024, we were told, as a result of hanging. And there was body-worn camera footage, which was shown at Sheffield Crown Court during Peter Lynch's trial. It showed him screaming scum and child killers, and you are protecting people who are killing our children at police officers. He was also seen holding a placard referencing rather a lot of stuff that I'll be talking about today. And the newspapers described him as a conspiracy theorist. Well, tell me, what on that list marks him out as a conspiracy theorist? He correctly identified the corruption at Davos, at the Huw amongst MPs, amongst prime ministers, amongst police, amongst TV, amongst the judiciary. That sounds like a factual board that he was holding up. But I think rather than anything that he actually did, I think it was that board and him getting coverage which sealed his fate. Because that board was calling out a lot of the organizations and people who were backed up by Starmer or in bed with Starmer. And not literally, of course, although we've heard plenty of that, haven't we, over the last few weeks? And I'm going to be really careful about what I say in that regard, because obviously there is ongoing trial. So Peter Lynch did plead guilty to violent disorder. And again, very troubling. Some of the representation that these people had was just telling them to plead guilty. Really appalling stuff. Doncaster Coroner's Court heard that his death was a result of hanging. An inquest is examining his death, including his mental health assessments and what kind of support he may have received, the circumstances surrounding a prison discipline charge he received the evening before he died, and more. Coerced, no doubt. Sarah thinks he was definitely bumped off. Yes, Nikki. And it's only when you start to really reflect on what he's done that you realize Nikki is calling him Keir Starlin. Yeah. And that's why I thought today was so important to see what has happened in that 2 years and for us to reflect on it. How far have we come? What is the world like? Is it in a different shape than it was 2 years ago? Answer yes. Quick answer yes. Stop fanning the flame, says Mel. She's laughing. She's joking. Got you. Absolutely. And that's the kind of shite that they used, right? Stolly said one shred of evidence means it's no longer a theory. It's a conspiracy. Absolutely. And Paul says, oldest trick in the book, lazy solicitors tell innocent people to plead guilty for less of a sentence. It really is. And we are awake, Sarah. Yes, indeed we are. So rest in peace, Peter Lynch. That must be so awful for his family, right? Awful. So, but there was so much more that came from Southport. And again, adding validity to why people say it was a Psy-Op. So following Axel Rudakabana's guilty pleas and sentencing in January 2025, several targeted legal interventions and policy overhauls were set in motion. So the government introduced specific legislative updates and proposed major statutory reforms. The government used the Crime and Policing Bill to close gaps which were highlighted by the case. So, for example, it makes it a criminal offence to possess a bladed article in private if your intention is to cause unlawful violence. Well, how are they going to prove this? This is absolutely open to debate and been the cause of much concern about how millions of innocent people could be swept up in this law for possessing what could be deemed a bladed article in their own homes. Don't most of us have those? I certainly do. It's fairly outrageous, troubling stuff. And then in March 2025, Jonathan Hall, KC, had been given the job of the independent review of terrorism legislation. He published his formal review regarding the Southport attack, and the government accepted his core recommendations, which are being drafted into law. And that includes things like a lone killer offence. And Hall proposed a new criminal offence to cover lone individuals planning non-terrorist mass killings. It explicitly targets individuals who they believe fixate on mass violence without an ideological, political, or religious motive. And again, very troubling. This could sweep up entirely innocent people. What about journalists and researchers who accumulate vast amounts of information, right? Vast amounts of information. Imagine in the wrong hands, in the wrong police hands, who decide that they come to your home and they find this information and they believe that you are collating it for some sort of unlawful violent activity. This is very dangerous stuff. It's open to such wide interpretation. Really troubling stuff. Troubling stuff. And then, of course, media and social media, they push for the contempt of court overhaul. because they said that so many people had carried out so much misinformation online regarding the Southport attack. And you saw people who we were told were arrested and people who were already dodgy from C19. And you were like, I suspect they're probably hand in hand with the state. Right. And so what they had was that they sought to evaluate how to punish what they deemed online disinformation before people are even arrested. So that's why we've seen such a huge swathe of people being arrested, because they're seeking to arrest people even before necessarily they have committed a crime. It's outrageous stuff. It's outrageous stuff. And the thing is, Keir Starmer's premiership heralded a new phase of censorship. The Online Safety Act, which is now in law, imposes strict legal requirements on tech companies to protect users, particularly children, we are told, from illegal content, harmful material, and age-restricted access. And in recent weeks, we've seen the absolute madness of this, because what you have is former Tory MP Nadine Dorries, who defected to Reform. She was involved in managing and pushing through the Online Safety Act, but she now regrets it. She now regrets it. She now wants it to be repealed, as she now supports reform, and she's found that they've fallen foul of the act, the very act that she was involved in pushing. And that's why you cannot trust most politicians. And it's so funny to see these awful people switch and change without any true integrity. And, you know, they sold us this idea, didn't they? You need the Online Safety Act because children and but the problem is that the regulations really are highly questionable when it comes to our free speech and measures across all censorship, actually. Starmer has continually maintained, we're not censoring anyone. BS. Even civil liberties groups, which are notoriously captured these days, and tech leaders have argued that the government's power to modify Ofcom, the regulator, to modify the regulations allow for state-sanctioned internet censorship. We've become too powerful. Like I said, traditional corporate legacy media is dying and the government are losing its handle on the narrative. Of course, they had to bring in that act. And of course, they had to use children. They always use children. Think of the children, the famous Simpson expression. They always use children because when they use children and when they talk about age restricted access, that then means that you have to have identity if you want to log on to any social media, which then means that they then have your identity for DNA, not DNA, well, oftentimes for that, but for data purposes. And you've had people like Elon Musk, owner of X, obviously pushing back against Starmer's censorship, but only because it impacts his business model. These people do not care about free speech. X is not free speech. It's not free speech. They've messed so much with the algorithms that it is Elon Musk's speech, but it's not free speech. So Starmer's administration also explored options with Ofcom to penalize or block platforms, and US officials got involved. Trump got involved to a certain degree because, again, it affects their business model. So it's not really about the people. It's not really about the people. And the other thing that was deeply impacted in terms of legislation and law after Southport, and which plays into the idea that this is a Psy-Op, is that there was some amendments to the Criminal Justice Act, which provides police with stronger powers to tackle what they deem as antisocial behavior. And again, it's very much open to their perspective. And as said, in terms of Southport, statutory inquiry underway. Phase 1 has already finished. Phase 2 will examine the wider implications of how Southport impacted the rest of us, and will also focus on, here's the point, what is deemed as dangerous content online. So again, phase 2 of the Southport inquiry will be drilling down on online output, and of course it will increase the censorship. And we've seen in Starmer's Fabian dream of a UK that not everything deemed dangerous content online is truly that. They just have their own rationale and their own reasons for why they want certain people offline. And it's really important to remember that many of the people on the streets and on social media were angry about immigration, the ultimate tool to divide. I have covered this issue from all ways, including the great replacement theory, and I've interviewed people who have written and broadcast about that. But I also know there is a great deal of fear-mongering around people coming into the country. I've seen that weaponized by filthy, craven, grifting individuals. So many UK videos push that divisive narrative. But I refuse to get drawn into that because it's a tool of the state to divide us. That is not the same as legitimate discussion about immigration. A lot of those people are just whipping up hysteria. And I ain't part of that. And I will not be part of that. But there has been some important stuff that has come out, and via people like Elon Musk, including the resurrection of the issue of the grooming gangs, which is particularly pertinent in the UK. Grooming gangs, officially termed group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse, refer to networks of 2 or more perpetrators who coordinate to sexually exploit, traffic, and abuse children. That is the official definition of what a grooming gang is. And the issue is, of course, most prominently recognized as a major national scandal in the United Kingdom, where systematic institutional failures allowed these gangs to operate for decades and with impunity. Grooming gangs typically target highly vulnerable girls and children and males, often girls aged 11 to 16, primarily white and female, although not exclusively so. These young, vulnerable people often live in local authority care, living in poverty, or dealing with mental health charities. And one of the reasons why this has become so divisive and such a political issue is because of the demographics of the perpetrators. The demographic makeup of grooming gangs is overrepresented by men of British Pakistani heritage. This is a fact. And it is also a fact that in some of the constituencies where grooming gangs were rife, they were run by Labour councillors. And it is also a fact that Labour have been so reluctant to do anything about this is because it could implicate people who are now in our government. These are all facts. We shouldn't shy away from them. We shouldn't. Because to shy away from the fact that there is a demographic here is to let people down and continue to let people down. We cannot, when it comes to abuse, we cannot be overly PC. It's dangerous. So there have been lots of people who've been prepared to speak out about it. There have been major scandals all around the UK. Rotherham, there was a landmark 2014 inquiry by Alexis J that estimated that at least 1,400 children were abused between 1997 and 2013. Telford, an independent inquiry revealed that over 1,000 children were exploited over 3 decades. 3 decades. That police, social workers, local councillors, politicians felt that community cohesion was more important than listening to victims. It is a scandal. And I'm actually glad that Elon Musk resurrected it. I don't think for 1 minute he did it for the right reasons. But honestly, on this occasion, I don't care. That is a scandal that was put to one side and victims were ignored. It's not okay and it's not acceptable. It really isn't. And so what you've had, a series of things since then. You've had the Rupert Lowe inquiry, which is subject to quite a lot of controversy. Although I have talked to people and I've had people on here who have submitted to the inquiry and they were happy to be able to be heard and to be able to speak. But there is also people who are opposed to it, feel that it was used to launch Restore as a political party, which happened immediately on the day or the day after that the inquiry closed, which I still think is unethical. But then I would, because I don't fight against child abuse for political reasons. I do it simply because it's wrong. And I don't care who is the abuser. I absolutely don't care who's the abuser, whether it is a lord, whether it is a member of parliament, or whether it is a British Pakistani living in Rotherham. I don't care who it is. Highlight them, expose them, punish them, and help the victims. That's my position on it. So anyway, after that, after the Rupert Lowe rape gang inquiry, the government didn't want to do anything. And then you had Baroness Casey. She did an independent inquiry. She established a statutory independent inquiry into grooming gangs to be chaired by Baroness Anne Longfield to investigate systemic institutional failures. And I don't hold out a lot of hope for that, because this has been formed under a government of people who are almost certainly implicated in the cover-up in the first place. And what has ever happened from any government inquiries? They talk about how independent it is, but very rarely are these inquiries independent. Very rarely. And so then you have what they've now created, this dedicated specialist grooming gang task force operating across all 43 police forces, scaled up operations, hundreds of new arrests, identification of thousands of new victims. All this should have happened before. It shouldn't have taken a tech billionaire to say, what the hell is happening in England? It shouldn't. So that's one problem we are dealing with. And it's a big one. And it's a significant one, because obviously, as I say, it implicates people in our government. But there are more, obviously. I've covered secret and not so secret groups, including Common Purpose, the Fabian Society, and the Freemasons. But one group above all others have given me tremendous concern over the last 2 years: the infiltration of the UK. A great deal of talk is now going on, thanks to the likes of people like David Miller, who proved that anti-Zionism is legally protected in the UK. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Zionist infiltration of the UK, which is very real. Very real. And it mostly comes at us through organizations like Labour Friends of Israel, or Conservative Friends of Israel, or Reform Friends of Israel. I'm sure, given the new news to do with Restore, there will probably be a Restore Friends of Israel soon. And because no political party, no matter how English you think your party is, remains uninfiltrated. Not one. Doctors have been targeted. Journalists have been targeted. Pretty much everyone who has found themselves on the receiving end of this weaponization that is taking place, the weaponization of anti-Semitism. And there are many concerns about what's happening. We've seen it recently. And you have pro-Israel advocacy groups that have managed to successfully pressure the UK government into certain foreign policy stances, such as the proscription of groups like Palestine Action. And you have high-profile undercover investigations that have previously shown the kind of clandestine involvement by Israeli embassy officials, by lobby groups. A brilliant documentary, don't even know how old it is now, it might be about 7 years old, is The Lobby on Al Jazeera. It's available online and absolutely worth watching. But the weaponization of anti-Semitism is outrageous, and they are able to cast a wide net for this. Oh yes, they are. And but this is interesting. On Monday, June the 22nd this year, there is going to be a debate in Parliament. Pro-Israel influence on politics and democracy in Westminster Hall. That is a consequence of a petition. Now, I'm not a great fan of petitions, as we know. They are largely to make people feel that something is being done, something is happening, when in fact nothing generally is. But the good thing about it is it gives everybody the opportunity to be able to promote that event and raise that up as a national topic of conversation. It's not a topic of conversation you're going to get on probably the BBC or ITV or anywhere else like that, because they push the fear. but it's interesting, and it's a topic and debate that we need to have. And for me personally, we truly saw the power of Israel and Zionism in the US and the UK. That's primarily where I've seen it. And I appreciate that many people saw it before me. I was slow understanding it. I was conditioned to see questioning Israel as anti-Semitic. I didn't even realize I'd been conditioned that way. It's that subtle. I had been in legacy media for too long, where any questioning of genocide is dismissed as we don't know enough and that Israel has a right to defend itself. Those are the stock phrases. But surely it's our job as journalists to find out enough. Anyway, I finally did. And I was horrified with not only what Israel has done to Palestine, but the influence that Zionists have in my country to shut down any discussion about what is taking place in the Middle East. Recent weeks, we've seen what has happened in Golders Green as one example, how 2 Jewish stabbings have been widely acknowledged by media, but there was a third, a Muslim man that did not fit the narrative. The accused, Essa Suleiman, has been charged with the attempted murder of 3 people. But look how that was weaponized. A Cobra meeting was called immediately. We only have Cobra meetings in the UK for big scenarios and events like COVID-19 as one example. And then you had Mark Rowley, the commander of the Metropolitan Police, who was having private meetings with Israeli assets and lobbyists. And then police rocked up at my door saying that there had been a report that my report into Golders Green was accused of being anti-Semitic. Well, I got rid of them in quick time, and that is ongoing. Because we need to not allow for this madness and these attacks. And I appreciate that not everybody is a journalist and not everybody has available to them the resources that I have. But that's exactly why I'm standing up on this issue, because I'm standing up to be counted, because not everybody can. Some people are being accused and criminalized over nonsense. It all ties in with the same thing. It's a thread. It's a thread. If they couldn't get you on the free speech nonsense to do with Southport, they'll get you to do with Zionism, which they are so busy. When you're an anti-Zionist, they want to conflate it with anti-Semitism, but that in its own right is anti-Semitic. And UK politics is a show. It is all infiltrated by Zionists. Greens claim they are not, but Zach Polanski apologized for upsetting Zionists recently when he spoke out about Golders Green. And Mark Rowley, senior cop, actually issued a letter to Zach Polanski for asking questions about the force that was used on Essa Suleiman. And then he immediately backtracks. There's not one political party that is not in some way captured or on their knees. And also about UK politics, I know many people thought that reform was going to be the great savior, not me, of course. But Nigel Farage, so much controversy. Come on. You can tell this man is a media creation because they're still letting him get away with it. It almost doesn't matter now what he says. Give him 5 million. Well, now the news story is my phone was hacked by Moscow, says Farage, deeply concerned. Claims that Russian spies leaked details of 5 million gift. Who said it was a gift? They've changed that story repeatedly. And Ben Habib, who has been on Wake Up, who was with Farage for Brexit and then at Reform and then has since separated and is now runs Advance UK, has made some outstanding allegations against Nigel Farage, against Boris Johnson, how they were both given £1 million each by a crypto billionaire, Christopher Harborne, to essentially throw the 2019 elections. Why isn't that being cut? I just don't understand why these major stories that are, well, of course I understand, but our corporate media has such a lack of curiosity about them. It's astonishing stuff. And Reform is just full of old Conservative MPs. And I do wonder what part Christopher Harborne played in there being so many old Tory MPs in Reform. So you have like Suella Braverman, former Conservative Home Secretary, Robert Jenrick, former Conservative Immigration Minister, Danny Kruger, who was the first sitting Conservative MP to defect to Reform, Lee Anderson, former Conservative Deputy Chairman, Andrew Rossingdale, longtime Tory MP, Nadeem Zahawi, former Chancellor of the Exchequer and Conservative Party Chairman, Nadine Dorris, former Culture Secretary and Conservative Party member, Sir Jake Berry, former Minister without Portfolio and Conservative Party Chairman, David Jones, former Secretary of State for Wales, who spent over 50 years as a Conservative member before defecting. So many others. Dame Andrea Jenkins, Jonathan Gullis, Maria Caulfield, Anne Widdecombe. How much did a tech billionaire have to do with their defections? Well, it's hilarious because almost all those people were part of the reason why the Tories were so horrendous. So Reform cannot possibly be some kind of saviour party with that bunch of losers on board. And also it's headed up by Nigel Farage and Richard Tice. So, but bottom line is all parties are infiltrated one way or another, and now by Zionists. And big up to David Clues at UNN, who is doing some great work on this, because Restore, it turns out, also have Zionists in their midst, that great English party. And I'm so over all of this. I'm so over all of this. And a lot of this also links up to Epstein and the Mossad and all of that kind of stuff, not suggesting Restore, of course. Anyway, so yes, a lot of stuff that is currently coming out. But I actually, and again, this is where you can disagree with me, because that's what the great thing about Wake Up. But me personally, there is not one political party that is representing the British people. That's it. That's my position. So I want to talk about Epstein. Well, if the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's how reluctant they all were to release any information to do with those so-called Epstein files, right? What a couple of years for anyone associated with trafficker and predator Jeffrey Epstein. Obviously, Virginia Giuffre, which I will get to. Prince Andrew, formerly known as Prince and formerly known as the Duke of York, both taken away from him. And since Trump has been in power, we've had the release of the Epstein files as a consequence of Thomas Massie pushing for the Epstein Transparency Act. It was absolutely evident that Donald Trump did not want to release a great deal of information to do with the Epstein files. And it's evident because he was far closer to Jeffrey Epstein than he wanted people to believe, and almost certainly implicated in some very, very questionable things. But the whole thing has humiliated the MAGA squad. And some people are like, well, it was only Donald Trump who released it. The Democrats never released it. Well, they never released it because they didn't have a Thomas Massie and a Marjorie Taylor Greene pushing for it. And the Democrats were quite happy because they're also implicated. They're all implicated. Jeffrey Epstein just kept buying up people. But the whole thing has been a huge humiliation for the MAGA squad. They're humiliated, absolutely humiliated. Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Alina Habba, the American lawyer who ended up representing Trump, Pam Bondi. I mean, Pam Bondi was prepared to put herself through some serious humiliation ritual for her boss. It's been quite astounding. I mean, some of the stuff that Bondi said, if you remember, she said, let's just bring in an image of Trump, shall we? Just to, there he is. Pam Bondi, if you remember, she gave a series of media interviews in February 2025 when she was asked about the so-called kind of Epstein client list. She said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review. Then she later said, when she was asked whether it involved anything to do with child abuse, she said, and I'm quoting her directly, there are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn. I don't like the expression child porn. I feel it re-victimizes the children. But nonetheless, these are the things that she said. And then suddenly crickets. And even when they did forced to release the Epstein files, they did so many shocking redactions, shocking. And, you know, it was essentially Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, and a third politician whose name has escaped me right now, so please forgive me. But 2 out of those 3 who went up against Trump for the Epstein files, they're no longer in power. They're not. They fought long and hard. And Thomas Massey, he lost his political seat last week after Zionist Miriam Edelson piled millions into opposing him on behalf of Israel. The Epstein files, of course, massive collection of nearly 3.5 million pages of investigative documents, 180,000 images, 2,000 videos declassified by the US Department of Justice. And that follows the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The records span over 2 decades of local and federal criminal investigations into Epstein and his co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. The files were made publicly accessible through the Department of Justice Epstein Library. It's the largest and final release of the phases was in January of this year. And the whole lot was organized into 12 distinct data sets. And so you had like data sets 1 to 8, which was the police and FBI records, data set 9, which featured private email correspondence between Epstein and high profile figures. You had data set 10, which contained approximately 180,000 photos and 2,000 videos seized from Epstein properties. And it went on. And we saw, as I said, this was the publicly humiliation of MAGA. Because you remember when they did their phase 1 and you had people like the woman from Libs of TikTok, they came out with a bound folder given to them by Pan Bondi, and they thought that they were all official and everything. And they were posing, and it's like you're posing with details of child abuse and trafficking, but they were acting like they were stars and everything. But every one of them have been shown to be, well, bought. They're bought. And so this period has been a real humiliation for a lot of MAGA because they tried to stick by Donald Trump regardless. They still do. They still talk about how he's playing whatever 33-degree chess or whatever. BS. He's not. Absolutely not. Not buying it anymore. Absolutely not. But you might. And that is absolutely fine. And let us not forget all of the high-profile people who have been associated with not Donald Trump, with Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. There's emails in the Epstein files which show Epstein and Andrew discussing a private dinner at Buckingham Palace in August 2010. They also reveal an offer from Epstein to introduce Andrew to a 26-year-old Russian woman. There's further emails from February 2011 which contradicted Andrew's public claims that he had severed contact with Epstein in 2010. Donald Trump is mentioned thousands of times in the file. The documents include a 2006 FBI interview with Palm Beach police chief claiming Trump told him everyone had known Epstein's been doing this. They also include a compiled list of unverified hotline tips alleging abuse by Trump. Serious allegations, but they are only allegations. And I want to state once again that just because you're mentioned in the Epstein files, it doesn't mean that you have carried out criminal activity. And I apply that to myself. I'm mentioned 4 times, but I'm mentioned for talking about Andrew and Epstein being predators. So I think I'm actually mentioned in the Epstein file for the right reason. There was, of course, Bill Clinton. Staffers for the former US president appear in 2002 emails requesting Prince Andrew's contact details for a dinner invitation via Jeffrey Epstein. There are never before seen photos of Clinton alongside other celebrities, such as Michael Jackson, as one example. Then Steve Bannon, interesting stuff. Steve Bannon, of course, was in Donald Trump's first presidency, very close to him. Then there's loads of text messages between Steve Bannon and Epstein, where Steve Bannon is advising him on how to rebuild his image as a philanthropist, because they always escape to charity, don't they? These sodden predators. They're good at it. And then, of course, you had all the business leaders. The files detail interactions with Bill Gates, with Amazon's Jeff Bezos, with Elon Musk, including a 2014 email from Musk asking about parties wanting to let loose. They also detail Epstein's financial ties to retail billionaire Les Wexner, he of Victoria's Secrets. And it's been quite sobering what's taken place. But actually, when you look at it, what has happened since? What's happened since? Did we all get upset and angry and then for nothing to happen? Because at the moment, the only person who has faced any kind of punishment or any accountability appears to be Ghislaine Maxwell, and even she's been put into a soft prison. And then you have the Department of Justice over-redacted information, heavy black boxes to protect the names of wealthy enablers and powerful suspects, while leaving unredacted names of survivors and victims. It's almost like let's shame those for daring to speak out. And the DOJ originally compiled over 6 million pages of evidence, but only roughly half have been published. And obviously this is not totally transparent. They've only given out what Donald Trump can still survive. In recent weeks, we have heard that Andrew Windsor is under investigation and that police are investigating 2 allegations of child sexual abuse that allegedly took place in Surrey and Berkshire from the late 80s to the 2000s in an unredacted FBI report. Let me just remove him there. In an unredacted FBI report, and I think it was from July 2020, a woman claimed to have been drugged at night, driven to child abuse ring parties in Virginia Water during the mid-1990s. The same woman also claimed to have been hit by a dark blue car driven by Prince Andrew. These are only allegations, of course, in which she allegedly suffered injuries to her ribs, her hip, and her leg. And in the same document, the woman alleged sexual abuse against Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell. She claimed to have been restrained on a table, tortured with electrical shocks by Maxwell, while the former prince and other men watched on. Surrey police previously said they had found no evidence of such allegations being reported to them after the review of their systems. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has previously denied any wrongdoing over his links to the Epstein files. Surrey is now the 3rd British police force to formally investigate allegations of criminality since the US Department of Justice released millions of documents relating to Epstein. So we shall see. The Epstein files also suggest that Epstein's aircraft traveled to locations including Heathrow, Gatwick, Luton, and the Royal Air Force bases of Horsham and Marham. And I think probably in the UK, it is these, let me just remove that and put these, it is these 2 men, Peter Mandelson and Andrew, who have probably taken the biggest hits in terms of Jeffrey Epstein. I don't think anybody else has taken hits like these 2, and honestly served them right. So Prince Andrew, formerly known as the Duke of York, was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The arrest followed the unsealing of the Epstein files, obviously. Again, he strenuously denies all wrongdoing. He was arrested by UK authorities, remember, on his 66th birthday. 6 cop cars showed up. And detectives are investigating whether he abused his former position as a UK trade envoy, which we've since discovered his mother, the Queen, pushed for him to have. And the question is, did he share confidential, commercial, and government information with Epstein? So police are reviewing allegations, but as a consequence of all of this, and because the monarchy is determined to survive one way or another, despite its filthy, disgusting history, they found Andrew one step too far, which is shocking because Charles has notoriously been surrounded by child abusers since he was a child. But Andrew is a very convenient scapegoat in many respects. And William and Kate, they feel no loyalty to him. They want him out the way. They want to be able to ascend to the throne. So they've kicked him to the curb. He's had his titles stripped, as I said. He's no longer, Duke of York or a prince. He's been directed to vacate his Windsor home, Royal Lodge. He's currently living on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. It's not a council flat. He's still living in great luxury and great privilege. And obviously, it should be remembered that Andrew paid a financial settlement to Virginia Giuffre in 2022. And we were told that it was in the region of $12 million, that it was financed by the Queen. But the truth is that the Queen paid to shut down allegations and a further probe into widespread child trafficking. The woman that so many people related to as Granny, she did that. She did that. Then, of course, there's Sir Peter Mandelson, an extensive relationship with Jeffrey Epstein that he's done everything he could to try and hide. Birthdays, business trips, sailing trips, Paris. It's a whole other scandal. Why was it so important that Peter Mandelson became the US ambassador, the UK ambassador to the US? And it was approved by Donald Trump. Was it because both Trump and Mandelson had a lot to lose by information about Epstein coming out? They were both deeply tied to Epstein. And I appreciate that for about the last 10 years of Epstein's life, they weren't. Trump wasn't. I don't think Mandelson was. But they had been. And Mandelson did everything he could to distance himself. Let me have some water. Yes, London lady. Now, that's a good point, Monica, because that is still a possibility. The Queen paid with our money. Yes, we have to allow for that. Yes, we do. Gary says, and this is a good point as well, the royal rejection of Andrew also makes them look good. Ian points out that Charles said 20 odd years ago, are you impugning my brother? Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. So I think a lot of it's very interesting, but we have to ask why. And I'm going to read this. Somebody said something about Trump. Miss Dizzy says Trump brings them to the front to expose this, in my opinion. And again, I think it's really important to have lots of different opinions around here. I don't agree with Miss Dizzy and she doesn't agree with me on this point, but we both are entitled to an opinion on this. So there you go. Thank you. I appreciate that, because you're not alone in thinking that. Lots of people think about that. Explain Savile and Charles. I can't, mate. I can't. And I've done a video about that. I've done a wake up video about that. I've done a deep dive into Charles and his predator mates. But anyway, going back to Mandelson. So he was sacked as the UK's ambassador to the United States. He was arrested by the Metropolitan Police on suspicion of misconduct in public office, released on bail. The investigation centers on allegations that he passed market sensitive, confidential government information and advised on government policy while serving as a minister in the 2000s. So was he passing confidential information to his mate Jeffrey Epstein? Because documents released by the DOJ contain emails indicating that Mandelson attempted to alter policy on bankers' bonuses and advise Epstein and Wall Street figures to pressure our treasury. And additional emails allegedly showed him forwarding confidential government memos concerning asset sales to Epstein. He resigned from the House of Lords and the Labour Party. But this is embarrassing always round. The fallout and ongoing investigation into his relationship with Epstein is just, well, it's ongoing. And we also found out that he'd been vetted, and it was found that he was a problem and shouldn't have that job. But they went over the heads of what's the point of having a vetting if you're going to go over the heads of it? And that's why it's about so much more than Peter Mandelson just becoming, obviously, the UK ambassador. And what's always interesting is Mandelson frequently has no recollection of anything. That is mad, with terrible memory loss. And, excuse me, interesting fact. The judge leading the Southport inquiry and the judge leading the vetting review into Peter Mandelson's appointment is the same man, Lord Fulford. He was previously on the NCCL's Gay Committee when it allowed members of the Paedophile Information Exchange to attend meetings. Lord Fulford was also alleged by the Mail on Sunday of starting up a group to legally defend Pi, but he had no recollection of that group, and he apologised for having Pi at meetings. And I did a short about him last week, which is available on my TikTok, on my Instagram, and I think on my YouTube channel. And he's a state agent, moves from one good job to another. And obviously, most famous of Epstein's trafficked victims, I think, has to be Virginia Giuffre, born Virginia Roberts. She endured a traumatic childhood. She alleged that she was abused by a family friend and her own father before becoming trapped in Epstein's sex trafficking network as a teenager. She'd met Ghislaine Maxwell. Her father worked at Trump's Mar-a-Lago, a great pickup point for Epstein victims. And Virginia was working there kind of like on towel duty and swimming pool duty and that sort of stuff for a teenager. And Ghislaine Maxwell picked her up there, and then she was like swept up into Epstein's net. And Virginia spent years trying to get some accountability. She sued Epstein, she sued Maxwell. Her 2021 civil lawsuit resulted in that payout, which, as one of the commenters rightfully commented, well, it's almost certainly our money. It was almost certainly our money that was paid to shut down any further inquiry into Epstein's victims and how much it probably infiltrated the UK government and the royal family. And just important to note, once again, Prince Andrew has continuously denied all allegations. Virginia founded a non-profit organization that has also been subject to a lot of controversy. It said that the money that was supposed to go to the charity that was paid by the Queen had not gone to the charity. There was lots of question marks about that. I felt really sorry for her. I mean, I'd had some difficult times with her when she was alive because there were some of her actions which I was opposed to, such as the fact that she was a recruiter. So she would recruit young girls to be part of the Epstein network, but she was also an abused girl. And I didn't like the way that she would turn on survivors. I remember Molly Brown, I think it's Molly Brown, very bad with names. I've interviewed her, and Molly had spoken out about how Ghislaine Maxwell had once approached her and she managed to get rid of her and didn't get swept up into the Epstein net. And then Molly came forward with some intelligence, important intelligence, and Virginia and others were just horrible to any kind of new survivors who would surface. And it was almost like they were territorial. And I always said, and now unfortunately it's come to pass, I always said that the story of it being about Epstein and his mates receiving massages from teen girls is a cover. It's a gatekeeping operation. The girls themselves were part of a gatekeeping operation about something much darker, including, you know, potentially cloning, and obviously widespread trafficking, but also the abuse of children. I mean, the stuff that it's highly likely went on at the Mexico ranch, we have no idea about. They're digging it up now. They're digging it up for, you know, cloning and whatever else has taken place there. So some of it's really scary. But what really changed me was when I read Virginia's memoir, Nobody's Girl. I did a long look at Virginia's memoir, and it made me so sad because when you strip away from it all, right, she was an outspoken and very strong survivor. But when you strip away from it all, she is still somebody's child who she said that she was abused by the man who was her father. But she's still somebody's sister. She's still somebody's mother. And I found it incredibly sad. I felt that poor Virginia, like many of us, had a bit of a bum deal from the start. Some of us can turn it around, others can't. And what we heard was that she took her own life at her farm in Australia in April last year. Well, initially, myself and others who have looked deeply into the story were like, yeah, she was having a terrible hard time. There were serious allegations of domestic violence. She had obviously appeared in that picture some weeks where she said that she'd had a crash with a bus, but the bus driver said it wasn't anything like that. But she looked terrible. She looked almost dead then, actually. And many people now, and I have to say I have added myself to that list, now believe that her death it's so suspicious. It's so incredibly suspicious because when you look now at everything that came out after her death, all the Epstein Transparency Act as one example, and the people who were significantly implicated, and she named lots of names, including people who were, involved in law, politicians, people involved in retail, billion-dollar businessmen. She named loads of names, and people, including Fiona Barnett. Fiona Barnett was on with us recently, and Fiona Barnett has said some gobsmacking stuff, and I'm still in shock at some of the stuff that Fiona Barnett said. Fiona Barnett tells an interesting story. She is an Australian activist, and one of the stories she told was that she was present when the British royal family, primarily Elizabeth II, carried out child sacrifices. And Fiona Barnett was absolutely categoric when I asked her that there's no way that Virginia took her own life. And I tend to believe people like Fiona Barnett and Kirby Summers, another survivor, when they say, no, I don't believe that she took her own life, because they have an insight also that I don't necessarily have. Kirby was closer to Virginia, although I don't think for a second I don't know Kirby's position. I'm not saying that she's saying anything untoward, but what Kirby has done recently, which is really good, is she did a video naming the names that Virginia had named. Very brave indeed. So all of that was really sad, terribly sad. There was a lot of stories about this picture, this imagery. People said it was fake, but it's now been proven to be true. So we shall see. Hello, Lenticular Cloud. Sarah believes Fiona. Monica loves Fiona. And I think this is a really important comment, right? Fun Times Forever said, I wonder how many suicides are actual murders. I think there are many. I do too. So I think that poor Virginia needs some justice. I really do, one way or another, because now what you have is her family and other people all fighting over her money that she was paid. So that's Epstein in the round, as it were. And rest in peace, Virginia Giuffre. And Donald Trump's presidency, well, that heralded lots of very interesting stuff. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody act as swiftly as he did initially, because if you remember, he launched his term with a frenzy of executive activity. He issued 156 executive orders in the first 100 days. He broke records. And people were like, this is really good because there's really some important stuff actually that were on those executive orders, including about the rights to single-sex spaces. Then you had things like the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, which was established almost immediately. The idea was to downsize federal agencies, and Elon Musk was leading that. And I'm never been ever convinced about a billionaire cutting federal aid, ever. And it's also important to note that Trump's administration is the richest American administration ever. It features over 13 billionaires. On his first day in office, Trump pardoned more than 1,500 individuals who were convicted for their roles in the January the 6th Capitol riots. Trump declared a national emergency on the southern border on day one. He deployed the U.S. military to execute a vast immigration clampdown and deportation campaign. The administration invoked the historic Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to fast-track the deportation of alleged foreign gang members. Then you had executive orders which quickly eliminated federal recognition of things like, as said, gender identity, targeted diversity, equity and inclusion, DEI, initiatives across federal agencies. And it did things like restrict trans athletes from competing in women's sports. And the administration officially declared English as the official language of the United States. And Trump did stuff that I did absolutely back. such as pulling out of the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Agreement. Backed it. And the White House has openly and repeatedly declared an interest in expanding US sovereignty over Greenland, didn't back it. And obviously, the White House and Ukraine and Russia, the administration, has pivoted sharply from traditional Western alliances. It's reduced military aid to Ukraine, unlike the UK, which signed a 100-year deal with Ukraine. How to tell they're up to their necks in it without saying so, right? And Trump has taken a staunchly pro-Israel stance. The administration backed the relocation of Palestinians out of Gaza. The administration, alongside Israel, launched a major military campaign against Iran with the explicit objective of regime change. And AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, is one of the most powerful and heavily funded lobbying organizations in Washington, D.C. It exerts major influence on U.S. politics by championing unconditional political and military support for Israel. And the US administration is as captured as the UK government and all political parties. AIPAC has transformed into a massive electoral force in the US in recent years. And as I said earlier, you had the Israel lobby, people like Miriam Edelson, who famously got involved through millions at opposing Thomas Massie, who was calling out both Epstein, Trump, and ties to Israel. And you know what? We are in a period of great awakening, great noticing, because the divide to do with AIPAC has turned into this incredible pushback. And what you have are many people waking up to what is taking place and the lobbying power of the AIPAC lot. It's tremendous and it is intense, and it involves financial incentives and probably blackmail. We cannot rule out blackmail when it comes to Israel and the US and the UK Mossad Epstein connections, the whole Epstein class. That would be ridiculous and stupid of us to rule that out, because it is a proven fact that oftentimes very high-powered, high-profile people seek their kicks in ways that are unacceptable to the rest of society, such as human trafficking, such as child abuse. And that puts them in a compromising position with the people who are supplying the children and the girls and boys to them. So, but we also shouldn't forget the impact of the technocrats on Trump's presidency, because again, that impacts us all. Trump has shifted away from a traditional, the idea of being expert-led bureaucracy, to this populist techno alliance, which is often referred to as the broligarchy. Right? As romances are taking place all over the place. You have a combination of anti-establishment populism with a deep partnership with Silicon Valley billionaires. And Trump favors them very much. And we could see that initially with Trump's relationship with Elon Musk, putting Elon Musk in these incredible positions, but they soon fell out. And then you had Elon, who started tweeting about why the Epstein files weren't being released, because Trump was in them. And then they made friends again, and Elon forgot his previous stance, which is obviously very convenient. But Trump made clear at his second inauguration that Silicon Valley tycoons are absolutely at the center of this administration. They were all there at his inauguration, and he has them at the White House for meetings and events. Here they are at the inauguration, and he has them at the White House for meetings and events. This is very common, because these people are all important to him, because they are the richest damn people on the planet, largely. And they are a big feature. And he took them recently on his China trip. and which he left with almost nothing of what he wanted, despite thinking that he was going to get some good play from the Chinese. After one of the big things about Trump also when he came in on his second administration was to do with his tariffs and his punishing tariffs to China. But I think probably when it comes to the tech bros and when it comes to Trump, the advance over the last 2 years of AI is just simply gobsmacking, astonishing, stunning, because since ChatGPT launched in November 2022, and originally it was seen as this clever novelty, wasn't it? People were like, oh, I can write, I can explain, I can summarize what I'm saying, I can answer questions. But the truth is that that was a very key moment, because that was the moment that what had been a niche tech story exploded into the mainstream. And since then, and the last 2 years have been the biggest advancement. And so what you have is like OpenAI saying that ChatGPT now has more than 700 million weekly active users. A lot of people. Google says AI Overview now reach more than 1.5 billion users in 200 countries and territories. This is astonishing. And the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, admits that trillions of dollars are being used to build data centers and power grids that will come from us, just regular, ordinary people, taxpayers, from savings accounts, from pension funds, and it will be mandatory. He said America needs trillions in AI infrastructure spending, and that people will be forced to invest in it. Much of this, he said, will come from savings accounts and pension accounts. So we've seen the advancement of it. It's very interesting. And the changes are also interesting. And I think it's also interesting to look back over the last 2 years and what people predicted and what has become reality. So people predicted that AI would become a normal work tool quickly. That's happened. So I've talked to people now who say that they couldn't do without it when it comes to their research and looking. I think AI is a really good starting point, like Wikipedia. Start there, then double check everything it said and take it from there. But I think it's a good starting point and it has its uses. But there's also lots of stuff which is very problematic about it. But there's still some of the more dramatic claims which haven't borne fruit yet. Most firms have not yet replaced whole teams with AI, but they will. They will. It's a really important, useful reality check to say that at this stage that they haven't. And we're also seeing that AI has limitations. There are some jobs that it's going to struggle to replace, such as maybe, journalists, actually, maybe one of the, and anybody kind of creating. But AI has gone into a whole new area now of misinformation. They're also going to use that against us. Trust. What has happened over the last 2 years is trust in AI is evaporating largely because, and this I think is where one of the biggest shifts has occurred, because sourcing, retrieval and verification of facts matters so much. And we see some outrageous stuff out there a lot of the time. And I've fallen foul of it myself because sometimes you simply don't know, which is why I believe that AI generated content should bear some sort of acknowledgement that is AI. Images that I see online, I want to know that it's AI generated. Videos, I want to know it's AI generated. That I believe it would be useful to put in law. And I do see that there are some good uses for AI. It's very good at creating first drafts. It's good at condensing information. It helps with research. All of these things are useful and good, but it's always the same, isn't it? These things are always in the hands of people who are a little bit demonic and not like us. They're not like us. When you hear people like Sam Altman or the guys from Palantir, Alex Karp or Elon Musk, when you hear them speak, they're not like us. They're robotic, they're detached, they don't have the same kind of emotional landscape that the rest of us have. They see things very black and white, and these are the people who are programming the AI. They're not like us. It's still flawed. It can invent facts. It can miss context. It can sound far more certain than it should. But the next phase is going to be interesting. And this is where I think you're going to see things like you're going to have the push for a universal income, because you have people already like Elon Musk saying, AI is going to be able to do everything. And the next phase of AI is going to be very interesting, because it's going to be about operating across workflows, about the creation of software right at the very beginning of it, about the infrastructure, computing infrastructure. And what will happen is AI agents will move from being assistants to being the task operators. So AI will replace people. And I think AI is probably one of the biggest shifts currently underway in my lifetime. And these tech bros are all in with the big cheese in the White House, because he's making an absolute ton from it, obviously. Absolute ton from it. And another person who aligned himself with Trump was this man, Charlie Kirk. Where would the last 2 years be without me reflecting on the murder and fallout from Charlie Kirk? And let me say at the start of this, many people also believe this to be a psy-op, that the original story we've been told is not the truth. And the thing about Wake Up is I allow for that. Mainstream media will tell you the set narrative and that's it, not on Wake Up. On Wake Up, I allow for the fact that so many of my viewers are truly thinking, well-researched individuals, and they see ins and out that mainstream media simply refuse to. And so when one of my viewers, a viewer I can trust, says to me, it's a psy-op, it makes me consider it. And so Charlie Kirk, devastating what happened, obviously. 31-year-old conservative political activist, co-founder of Turning Point USA, assassinated on the 10th of September, 2025 at Utah Valley University. And what we are told is he was shot through the neck by a sniper, firing a bolt-action rifle from a nearby rooftop. Charlie was hosting his American Comeback Tour. It was an open air area of the campus. We were told at 12:23 p.m. while answering questions from the crowd, a single bullet struck him from the roof of the adjacent Losi Center. Bystanders and first responders rushed Charlie Kirk to the regional hospital, where he was pronounced dead. And following a 33-hour manhunt, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson was arrested, taken into custody. Robinson, we were told, allegedly confessed the crime to his father, who recognized his son from surveillance footage released by the FBI and convinced him to surrender. Investigators apparently discovered text messages and a note left by Robinson stating he wanted to take out Kirk because he believed Kirk was spreading hate. Family members noted that Robinson had recently become intensely focused on politics and the LGBTQ agenda, which Charlie Kirk opposed, the agenda that is, not politics. And it was also very convenient. What many of us who have been doing this for a very long time noted about the FBI text was that they were complete. They seemed to answer all the questions before people had them. I did this. This is why. This is where I was. This is where I went. Very bizarre stuff. That's generally not how it works. So it was very, very bizarre stuff. Tyler Robinson has been charged with aggravated murder, felony use of a firearm, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. The trial before Utah District Judge Tony Graff has been scheduled for 6th to 10th of July of this year. Robinson has not yet entered an official plea. And because of the nature of the public assassination, Utah prosecutors have announced they are seeking the death penalty. And what has been very interesting throughout this, I'm sure many of my viewers will agree, is a big counter narrative has been explored by someone who was once very close to Charlie Kirk, and that is Candace Owens. And she has explored this extensively, and she's made some howling mistakes, but she's also done some very interesting research work around it. Some people want to entirely write her off, and I think that's a foolish thing to do. Foolish. And she's done some very interesting. She's asking questions that actually do need to be asked, because since that, of course, like the Southport situation, you've had all these knock-on effects. There have been people barred from entering the States for making comments about Charlie Kirk on social media. So when Trump or any of them, when Trump wants to bang on about how awful it is in the UK with Keir Starmer, he needs to look at himself. But of course they don't, because they're always deflecting. But yeah, the big knock-on impact on people entering the States, people being deported from the States for making horrible comments about Charlie Kirk. But again, freedom of speech. Somebody wants to make a horrible comment, that's on them. I don't believe it should be criminalized. I don't believe that they should be barred or deported for doing so, but they did. And so it's ongoing, of course. And I think that it would be really remiss to talk about the death of Charlie Kirk and the ongoing criminal trial without actually mentioning his wife, Erika. Erika has emerged through all of this, of course. And Erika Kirk's public behavior has sparked really, really intense online scrutiny because she's odd. Her behavior has been odd. And you've had observers, you've had behavioral experts, and just social media critics who have widely debated her. And they talk about whether she's genuine, whether her grief is genuine. There is definitely a narrative which holds her somehow responsible for the death of her husband, holds her somehow as an accomplice in all of this. And she's weird. There's no getting away from this. Almost immediately, she issued a video after Charlie's death of her over his coffin. It was very weird stuff. It made people uncomfortable. Many people noted that her facial expressions do not seem to align with the apparent devastation in her voice. And body language analysts have pointed out that, well, cosmetic procedures like Botox probably may physically, restrict her facial movements, but nonetheless, some of her expressions have been deeply unsettling for people because it sort of hits us on a solar plexus level. We're just a bit like, that's weird. That doesn't make sense. And in major public appearances, we've seen with Erika Kirk that she has rapidly shifted from like deep sobbing to these sharp, defiant statements where she'll suddenly look at the camera and like, just stop or whatever. And it's weird. It looks like overreacting. It looks performative. All of this is fair criticism because she's been given the job, obviously, of taking over Turning Point USA, which was founded by her husband, which is not uncommon for bereaved widows to take over organizations. That's not uncommon, not at all. But public unease has grown substantially. And again, Candace Owens, big critic of Erika, and I don't always agree with everything Candace says about Erika, and it would be a lie if I said that I've listened to all of it. I haven't, but some of the stuff I've listened to I found difficult to listen to, and some of it sounds a bit too personal, revealing information about Charlie actually wanting to be with another woman when Erika came along is unkind stuff. It's unnecessary. It's not in the public interest, whether it's true or not. And so that kind of stuff, I think, veers away from being investigative to personal. I think Candace is angry with Erika for a multitude of reasons. Not all of them fair, but some of them are, because that's the kind of world we live in. And of course, we all grieve differently. We all do. And Erika has been subject to a great deal of scrutiny, including viral leaks, which allege inappropriate, flirtatious message exchanges between her as a 27-year-old and a 15-year-old minor. as one example. And there's been some very interesting developments on the Charlie Kirk show. Now, I don't know about any of you, but I find it unnerving they still use his name, right? Why don't they just revert to Turning Point UK? But it's still the Charlie Kirk show. The social media is still Charlie Kirk. Other people are tweeting for Charlie Kirk. That feels odd and it feels wrong, especially because prior to his assassination, and don't forget, Candice and others have talked in depth about the possibility of Israel somehow being involved in his assassination. But prior to his assassination, Charlie Kirk was talking about pulling back from his work to do with Israel. And what is very interesting and factual is that 8 days after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Brad Pascali, who is the chief strategy officer of Salem Media Group, the distributor of the Charlie Kirk show, suddenly registered itself in Israel via Clock Tower and via Clock Tower X LLC for Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the work involves creating digital media to combat what we're told is anti-Semitism targeting US audiences. But what this reeks of course, is the pro-Israel lobby groups once again gaining narrative control over Charlie Kirk's legacy. Because Charlie Kirk was quite clear prior to his death that he said he was on the verge of leaving the pro-Israel cause because of the pressure that was put on him by Israeli lobbyists to cancel people, to not be involved with certain people, to say certain things, and all this stuff is really concerning. So odd indeed. And also, we've also seen very clearly the Charlie Kirk show become very much now a vehicle for the promotion of Israel. And Erika talks about meeting Charlie in a line when she was traveling to Israel. And Erika is a Zionist, family is Zionist. Charlie Kirk show is very much now a Zionist show. And those are the things that concern people like Candace Owens. And I think she has a right to be concerned. So yeah, a lot of people have found Erika Kirk rather odd. But other people are like, the woman saw her husband assassinated in front of millions of people. She would be odd. It would make anybody odd. But the problem is there is a sense that Erika has been really kind of reveling in the whole idea of now becoming the main character. That makes people uncomfortable. So on the route of odd deaths, there are a number of odd deaths that feel unresolved. And in the UK, we have this fella. And this is Jay Slater. And I've seldom seen such an attack on people questioning the official narrative of Jay Slater since people questioned the official narrative to do with Madeleine McCann. And to me, that's really a good sign. And I've talked on here with Jan from Jan's Views, with Duncan Smith, and both of them have been targeted by online trolls, but much more. So Jay Slater, a 19-year-old apprentice bricklayer from Lancashire, tragically died from a fatal fall into a ravine in Tenerife in June 2024. His disappearance and the subsequent month-long search sparked a massive internet frenzy. Countless theories. But then authorities concluded that his death was a tragic accidental fall, but many people do not believe that. And they question it online, and it really looks like a new law is going to be introduced on the back of it, and we should all be worried. And what happened with Jay, we were told, was that he was in Tenerife on holiday. After a night out, he left his friends, traveled to an Airbnb in a remote area in the north of the island with 2 men he had met. The following morning, on June 17, 2024, he left the property on foot, attempting what would have been an arduous 14-hour walk back to his accommodation. And we were told that while attempting to walk through the rugged mountainous terrain, he sent a final Snapchat message to a friend saying, "Listen, I'm not going to make it." These things are key. When his mother in this picture showed up in Tenerife, she talks about receiving a text where people were attempting to blackmail and say that something had happened to Jay. Very disconcerting stuff. There was a massive 29-day search effort by Spanish police, mountain rescue teams, volunteers. His body was found at the bottom of a steep, remote ravine above a dry stream bed on July 15, 2024. An inquest at Preston Coroner's Court concluded death was accidental. Pathologists and coroners determined he suffered a massive head injury and a severed pelvis after falling an estimated 65 to 80 feet. The injuries, we were told, were non-survivable. It is believed the fall would have been instantly fatal. And you've had a lot of, well, it's public relations around this, and all that's always very interesting. There's a cast of characters. So initially, what happened was there was a sort of GoFundMe put out by Lucy Law, who was said to be Jay Slater's best friend. She received one of his final panicked phone calls indicating he was lost in the mountains with just 1% battery. But we had the wonderful and dear Peter Heyer, who we also lost over the last couple of years. And he came on and he did a deep forensic examination of what Lucy Law had to say on that GoFundMe. And he concluded that it was deceptive, that it was misleading. And there were a lot of characters in this. There was Ayub Hussein, who was one of the guys that Jay had traveled to the Airbnb to be with. Obviously, Debbie Duncan, Jay's mum, heartbroken. And then you had the coroner, Dr. James Adeley, very interesting man, coroner for Lancashire, so has been the coroner for people like Nicola Bulley, as one example, also featured in a TV show, very much considered another state agent. In fact, I may do Dr. James Adeley as a state agent short. That reminds me. So all of that was very curious indeed. Then you had Jay's friends, bit odd, the Brads and Bradley. Bradley Geoghegan testified at the inquest about their communications on the morning of his disappearance. But you do have these people like Jan's Views and Duncan Smith who are railing against it. And I fear very much that his mum, Debbie, is being used as a useful idiot for new state measures. So his mum, Debbie, very upset by some of the speculation online, got together with a local MP and they're pushing for new social media reforms. I'm telling you, by the time all of these people are finished with us, we won't be able to say sod all on social media the way they're going. And I'm genuinely sorry for her. I'm sorry for the family. I'm sorry for anybody who is genuinely deeply impacted by the death of Jay Slater. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't ask questions if questions are there to be asked. And there certainly are with this. There was certainly some problems with what had happened to him after he went off, whether he had been involved in stealing a watch, stealing money, whether he was there selling drugs, so many questions. And I get the sense that his family were happy to accept what the coroner had said, because that then put a lid on it. Then we didn't have to probe too heavily into what Jay may well have been up to. But either way, rest in peace, Jay Slater. But that is an odd death, and people should not be penalised or criminalised for saying so. And also, round about the same time, of course, there was the death of Dr. Michael Mosley. Do you remember that prominent British physician? Died June 5th, 2024. So just weeks before Jay, on the Greek island of Symi. That was very odd. There was a 4-day high-profile search. The body was found on a rocky slope outside a resort where the mayor was giving a press conference. Odd stuff. An initial post-mortem ruled out foul play, found no fatal injuries, suggesting he died of natural causes, Dr. Michael Mosley. So that was, that's Jay Slater. So that was also interesting and very odd, and all in the same month, June 2024. And there's a new one that has come up this last week. 3 sisters, I talked about it last week, right? Drowned in Brighton Sea. And now this does not make sense. No matter which way you look at it, it does not make sense. So this is the image that was first put out for the 3 sisters. Then we discover That is not a true image. That is an AI generated image. And that was all across the Daily Mail, the Sun, all the national newspapers, all the press, TV, and across media. That's an AI generated image. In fact, what happened was their father then put out an image which is more in their likeness, but when they were very young. It's very difficult to know how much communication their father had with them. But 3 sisters were said to have drowned off Brighton Beach, and very disturbing stuff. A lot of online speculation, a lot of black influencers saying that no black woman is walking into the sea because of their hair. So there's that. And we also heard the other astonishing thing is that their mother had drowned. And that's kind of bizarre as well. That their mother had previously drowned in a drowning accident. In fact, had, I think, taken her own life. There's inquest open for the 3 sisters, Jane Adatora, Christina Walters, Rebecca Walters, and they're all from the Uxbridge area of London, died in what police described as a tragic accident on the 13th of May. And their father, Joseph, paid tribute to his daughters, saying no words can truly describe the pain of losing 3 daughters in the prime of their lives. And I'm very sorry for you, Joseph. Very sorry indeed. He said the 3 had been more than daughters to him, describing them as my joy, my strength, and the beautiful light that filled our family with happiness and love. And that comment I made earlier about how often he'd seen them, that's kind of applying to other family members who have since come out, and they were like that none of this makes sense, but it turns out they probably hadn't seen the girls for a very long time. But that is very troubling for many people, because 3 sisters after their mum had died in a similar way. I don't think anybody is suggesting that these 3 sisters took their own lives. The suggestion is that it was a tragic accident, but it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. Now, Marcus, many people have suggested there is a ritualistic element about this. And right, all that fluff. How the hell does that happen? Did they fall off a boat? No, right? And Stephen is questioning Brighton and what may or may not go on there. And Aurora says quite rightly, I mean, this is the thing, is sometimes we're told a story and we simply can't believe it because it doesn't make sense. And Aurora says, how did 3 women drown at once? And Queen Bee just says very simply, organs. Mel says it's dodgy AF. And I mean, these are, people just aren't buying this. Sally Ann points out that they don't use organs from dead people. That is absolutely right, because obviously we've also seen over the last couple of years, I've talked with people, the mother who died at the Turkish hospital, and they were already busy removing her organs before, I think, her death. So we've seen that. Yes, Jacqueline, lots of ladies over the last 5 years found dead in water. Yes, we talked about that on last week's show. It was something tremendous, wasn't it? Wasn't it like 200? Women, don't quote me. It's on last week's show. Jennifer is very late, but that's all right. Welcome. So an odd story, and I'm going to be following that up. I may well go and do a live from Brighton at some stage and to kind of do a vox pop and see what people think, because it's not adding up for me, children. It's not adding up for me at all, but may they all rest in peace. God bless them. And of course, over the last couple of years, we've extensively covered the story of this woman on our first show. In fact, as I said, Lucy Letby, a former UK neonatal nurse convicted of murdering 7 infants, attempting to murder further 8 others at the Countess of Chester Hospital. But she was convicted of 7, the murder and the attempted murder of 7 children. She's handed 15 whole life prison sentences, and her case has sparked massive legal and medical controversy. There are real problems with the Lucy Letby conviction. We all know it. The first trial, where she was tried at Manchester Crown Court on 22 counts, she was found guilty of murdering 7 infants and attempting to murder 6 others. That was when she received 14 whole life orders. Then there was a hung jury on 1 attempted murder charge. A subsequent trial at Manchester Crown Court resulted in a guilty verdict for the attempted murder of baby K. All the babies are anonymous, bringing her total to 15 whole life sentences. And what we were told about Lucy Letby, the prosecution, she was so poorly defended at trial. It's astonishing. We've only just finding this all out now, really, after the fact, except a few core people who were doing and watching this, like, for example, Richard Gill, who's been on with us a number of times. Brilliant stuff. Midwife mediator, brilliant stuff. They were on this very early, but there's a lot of really probable stuff that never really received sufficient pushback at trial, such as the idea that she had injected air into the bloodstreams, air embolisms, that she had intentionally poisoned the babies with insulin that she had overfed or physically harmed them, that there with these handwritten notes containing self-incriminating phrases. A lot of this stuff has been debunked. And the case highlighted severe systemic negligence, and that is ongoing. And despite repeat and escalating warnings, which were raised by people, including Lucy, the hospital executives dismissed the concerns and pressured physicians and people on the ward, and there was an absolute institutional delay. And Lucy had also made complaints about other staff members, and these same staff members then turned on her, kind of packed up against her when it came to her charging and convictions. Very dodgy stuff. People recently arrested. The hospital is once again under the spotlight. But the fact is that the case does not stack up. It doesn't. And what has recently happened is she now has a fairly new barrister over the last year, and an independent international panel of pediatric and neonatal experts have disputed the prosecution's medical claims, suggesting worthy alternative natural causes for the collapses and arguing that the science surrounding air embolisms was misinterpreted. The Royal Statistical Society and various data experts have criticized the reliance on nursing rotas that simply mapped her presence against these adverse events on these babies, arguing that this created an illusion of guilt. So, current status is, following police submissions of additional intelligence, the Crown Prosecution Service announced they would not pursue further charges because they know there's a problem. And you have Letby's legal review team. They've submitted requests for appeal to the CCRC, the Criminal Cases Review Commission. There was an outrageous documentary on Netflix which featured the Lancashire police, and they all think that they're stars. The whole thing has been really bad. And I don't know if you've seen the documentary. I did a review in it, but they're like in Lucy's home. And whatever you think of Lucy and whatever the police thought of Lucy, her family are not responsible. Her mum and dad are not responsible. And their privacy was all trampled over for this Netflix documentary in footage given to them by the police force. Very bad stuff indeed. I also did a live outside the Lucy Letby inquiry outside Liverpool Town Hall in March of last year, and met a number of brilliant Wake Up viewers. It was wonderful. So I am of the mind that Lucy Letby is almost certainly a miscarriage of justice based on dodgy stats, based on groups of people looking for a scapegoat. And I think that there were problems with the NHS at that time. I'd covered it quite extensively, actually, around that period of time. And that was following the David Cameron, Nick Clegg coalition government, the depletion of the NHS. There was widespread problems in the NHS, there still is, it's continued. But that was like a new era of even more widespread problems in the NHS because they were depleting it so badly for their business mates and for private healthcare companies that were funding MPs and their offices. And so there were problems throughout the NHS. There were certainly problems at the Countess of Chester Hospital, where Lucy was accused of murdering the attempted murder of those babies. And I think that hers is absolutely ripe for the CCRC to refer it to the Court of Appeal. Whether they will or not is a whole other story, because they're so loath to do anything like that. And another story that I think is ripe for the CCRC is the Jeremy Bamber convictions. And Jeremy Bamber was convicted in 1986 of the 1985 White House farm murders in Essex, England. He's serving a whole life tariff for the shooting of 5 family members, his adoptive parents, his sister and her 2 6-year-old twin sons. Bamber has always maintained his innocence. He claims his sister committed the murders before dying by suicide. And the case absolutely remains one of the UK's most contentious and heavily investigated potential miscarriages of justice. And so the murder happened on August the 7th, 1985, and police discovered Neville and June Bamber, their adopted daughter Sheila Caffell, and her 6-year-old twin sons Nicholas and Daniel shot dead at their rural farmhouse in Tolshunt, Darcy, Essex. The scene initially appeared to be a murder-suicide. Sheila Caffell, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, was found in her bedroom with a rifle between her legs. Jeremy Bamber, the son, lived in a nearby cottage, called police in the early hours, claiming his father had phoned him to say Sheila had gone crazy with a gun. The prosecutor's case was that Bamber orchestrated the killings out of greed to inherit his family's $436,000 estate. The prosecutor said there was a sound moderator, a silencer, which was found by members of the family who eventually ended up inheriting the whole thing. But this silencer was found in a downstairs cupboard days after the police completed their initial search. The murder scene was tampered with by the police. They moved a Bible that I think had blood on it. There was much more. There was many problems with the conviction against Jeremy Bamber. And there was a lot of stuff that didn't even make it to court. The jury were deciding on his fate without actually full information. And you had things like his girlfriend, Julie Mugford, who came forward a month after the killings to testify that Bamber had confessed to plotting the murders. Yeah, the only problem there was that he was leaving Julie Mugford. And I'm not saying that he was necessarily a nice character. He was in his 20s. He was certainly arrogant, and he was leaving Julie Mugford. But on top of that, Julie Mugford eventually benefited with a payout from newspapers after a conviction against Jeremy Bamber was secured. And in October 1986, there was a trial at Chelmsford Crown Court. A jury found Bamber guilty of the 5 murders by a majority verdict, but again, without having full access to all information. There are ongoing appeals and controversies. Bamber, as I say, has always maintained his innocence for nearly 4 decades. I've been in communication with him. He sent me a letter before. He sent me a Christmas card. And currently, actually, he's filed multiple submissions with the CCRC. And again, the same with Lucy Letby. The British establishment is extremely reluctant to admit when it's made a mistake, because then it has to admit that the police got it wrong, the Crown prosecution got it wrong, the judges got it wrong. This is a lot of establishment unpacking that would need to take place. And it has done. Like, for example, Andrew Malkinson, who was accused of being a rapist, served 17 years inside and was released last year. So sometimes they do, but they didn't want to. They ended up having to finance a separate some separate research for Andrew Malkinson, because the state did everything they could to keep him inside. So once the state bangs up somebody, they are very reluctant to look again. But there is some actually damning evidence in terms of Jeremy Bamber, and I think this is new. This is sufficient new evidence, and I do hope that it will be referred to the Court of Appeal. And it's to do with an Essex police constable, Nicholas Milbank. And he was on duty at police headquarters during when the White House farm murders were said to be taking place. And he became a figure in the case after reports surfaced in 2024 claiming he monitored a 999 call from inside the farmhouse at 6:09 a.m. Well, Jeremy Bamber was still outside with the police at this stage. So essentially what happened was a great deal of this information surfaced as a consequence of Heidi Blake's brilliant Blood Relatives series, exemplary. I can be extremely critical of other journalists, but that was great work, and she did great work, and she revealed huge flaws in the evidence used to imprison Jeremy Bamber. And so back to this 999 call, she and Heidi Blake ended up tracking down Nicholas Milbank, and he admitted to this call, and she recorded it. She recorded the interview with him, and he stated that a 999 call came from inside the farmhouse at 6:09 a.m. He could hear movements, and if accurate, this is as solid an alibi for Jeremy Bamber's innocence as you can get, because, as I say, at that moment in time, he was surrounded by police outside White House Farm. And Milbank went on to allege a number of things, right? Shortly before his death from cancer in 2024, the CCRC obtained a handwritten statement from Milbank retracting and downplaying these claims, right, to the press. And he heavily disputed the circumstances surrounding, any of this. It was an absolute reversal. He said he didn't realize necessarily that Heidi was a journalist or for the New Yorker. You can clearly hear in the recording, she says who she is. He knew who she was. He retracted it because it was a problem for Essex police. And now he's dead. And now we just don't know. And what's on top of that, because Jeremy Bamber's campaign was finally starting to gain the traction it needed, what's happened? What has happened is you have the prison services and those responsible for Jeremy now banning him having communications with journalists, with media. And what we've heard is David Lammy, who is the Justice Secretary, and Priti Patel have written and given instructions to stop Jeremy Bamber being able to contact the media or talk with any of the media. And this is what happens if you use all your time inside to gain some tractions about the potential for a miscarriage of justice. They will then ban you. They will stop you. And it's also said that he's also been banned from talking to his campaigning team. I sent them a message over the weekend for them to confirm this, and I haven't got any confirmation through yet. But that was stated by Heidi Blake, so I tend to believe it. They don't want to unpack it. And there is at least enough there that it should be subject to the Court of Appeal. At least that. And the third one that I've covered quite extensively is Clive Freeman. Long supported this for at least 6 years. The Clive Freeman case, long-running legal matter involving Clive Freeman, a former soldier, recently referred to the Court of Appeal. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. This is about the body of Alexander Hardy, an Edinburgh-born plumber who was found in a burnt-out flat in London, where Freeman had been staying. Prosecutors claim that Freeman killed Hardy to stage his own death and commit a £300,000 life insurance fraud. Freeman was convicted of murder and arson in 1989, sentenced to life imprisonment. The prosecution argued Freeman used a military suffocation technique known as Birkin. We have talked extensively to the people around the Freeman campaign, and I think that there may well be good news soon from the Court of Appeal. We shall see. Pretty ain't pretty. No alien big cat. No, she's not. And by all accounts, she's a bully. That was covered up by Boris Johnson, allegedly. So we shall see. Clive Freeman is terminally ill, prostate cancer, remains one of Britain's longest serving prisoners, and his case is currently awaiting a final ruling from the Court of Appeal to determine if his conviction was unsafe. We shall see. And I want to talk very briefly about missing people, because we cannot forget people who perhaps are still missing. And one of the cases that we have covered extensively over the last couple of years involves this lad, and it makes me so sad. And we have talked extensively to his mum, Catherine. This is Jack O'Sullivan, a 22-year-old law student, vanished in Bristol, UK on March the 2nd, 2024, after attending a house party in the Hotwell areas. And despite extensive searches, multiple public appeals, £100,000 reward, no trace of him has ever been found. And it's so sad. It breaks my heart. Poor Catherine, poor Jack's dad, poor Jack's brother. It's just so awful. Jack left a house party at Hotwells Road, just before 3 a.m. in the morning. He was seen on CCTV just after 3 a.m. in the morning. At 3:24, he attempted to call a friend who had been at the party. When the friend called back, Jack answered, but the line went dead. Police identified further possible CCTV sightings. Jack's mobile phone and the Find My Friends app remained active until nearly 6:45 in the morning, placing him in the Granby Hill area for part of the early morning. And at 5 a.m., Catherine woke up. She sent a message asking Jack where he was and received no response. And I really feel sorry for Catherine and the family. They've had to do pretty much everything themselves. I don't care if mainstream media want to talk about extensive police searches. I've seen a family failed. Just like I've seen a family failed on other cases, except probably our most famous missing case, Madeleine McCann. But families are routinely failed when it comes to missing children and missing people. And it's really bad. And Jack's family have, Catherine has told us about the anguish at the prolonged search, about the difficulties and mistakes that were made by the police, about the critical early weeks that were just a failure, actually. The Avon and Somerset Police, who are responsible for this, appointed a senior investigator to conduct a further review of the investigation. And as said, there's a £100,000 reward currently being offered. You can view details, images and updates at the official Find Jack O'Sullivan campaign website. I will put a link in the description. And anyone with any information can contact the Avon and Somerset Police by calling 101, or they can contact the campaign team. I would recommend you contact the campaign team. And I briefly mentioned Madeleine. Of course, Madeleine McCann remains probably our most famous missing child. What an absolute mess over the last couple of years. It continues to be a lie. I'm not going to go into it in any great detail because I have covered it so extensively. But essentially, their number one suspect, Christian Bruckner, was acquitted, released. He and British Metropolitan Police running Operation Grange, the investigation, are reportedly attempting to extradite him. Such nonsense. All of this is to justify the ongoing Operation Grange. And I've done a separate extensive video looking at the last 19 years of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, and I will put a link in the description. And what else have we covered over the last couple of years? Well, in the last couple of years, we have covered loads about the climate change hoax, about how the British government has been forced to admit that they have been geoengineering us. And there was the first rally at Marble Arch. The second one is coming up with Matt Landman. I'm unable to attend because I'm booked for an event, but Matt will probably be joining us prior to that to talk about it. And the UK government is now, as I say, forced to admit that they've been carrying out geoengineering. They won't admit all of it. They'll only talk about greenhouse gas removal. And they won't admit to solar radiation modification. Yesterday, the skies were packed. We saw it. And I just don't buy this whole idea that it's because of like a change in the weather. I live near as damn it close to Heathrow. The sky should be like that pretty much every day, and it's not. And even when you compare comparable weather, it's not. That's not how it works. There was a public debate, obviously, is still ongoing. I think it's a problem for the UK government, and that's why they leaked out. They gave to their friends in mainstream media this whole idea that they were now going to be funding geoengineering research. And realist, great comment. We have to stop cows farting or the world is doomed. And that is the shite we've been sold, right? Remember all the Arla stuff? You just reminded me. Thank you so much, Danielle. I very much appreciate that. I feel empowered. Wake Up has empowered me. And I'm so angry at the madness that we've been surrounded with. And a lot of this, of course, is to do with the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, a collection of 17 interconnected global objectives adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015. And the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, I probably don't need to tell you about them, but they're dressed up beautifully. And don't they look so pretty? We love the look of them, right? The whole idea is it's a broad spectrum of social, economic, and environmental targets to be achieved by 2030, although Sandy Adams recently noted that they've extended that now, and they've extended it because they can't get us all to go along with it. It's that simple. And the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, they tell us, is all about ending poverty and other deprivations, must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education. But actually, these goals are about enslavement. We've seen that with the so-called 15-minute cities, haven't we? As one perfect example. And obviously digital ID and all of the surveillance state, everything is all part of the same thing, all part of the Sustainable Development Goals. We're paying for it and they're not now reaching their targets. And you have people like Sadiq Khan, who is the mayor of London, but he's also the mayor of C40 he's also the co-chair of C40 Cities. And C40 Cities is a worldwide organization of net zero fascists like Sadiq Khan, who has extended the madness of congestion charges in London when he shouldn't, based on one account. And they do this, and he shut down dissent of people saying, actually, these are lies, these are fabricated figures. He does everything he can because he's answering to a higher power than you and I. And I'm not talking about God. I'm talking about the fact that he's answering to the kind of parasitical globalists. That's who he's answering to. Anyway, the UN Sustainable Development Goals with the surveillance state, with the digital ID, it's having problems. It's having problems, and largely because people like us are pushing back against it. And very interesting times indeed. Very interesting times indeed. And we've talked about that substantially. A whole stack of wake-up shows have covered the UN goals. And didn't bring through a picture of, oh yes, I have actually. And this, of course, was one of the major court cases that happened internationally, was to do with Sean Diddy Combs, currently serving a 50-month federal prison sentence after being convicted in October 2025 on prostitution-related charges, held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York. I think he's been moved, actually. I'm not sure about that. But it was very interesting. As the case progressed, so many allegations made against him. Now, this is somebody that I've interviewed several times when I was a music journalist, and I've talked about that. I've been to his home. I went to his home when he had a cut up hand, and he told me that a glass had shattered in his hand. And actually it turned out, I think it was Zoe Synchronized Soul had found the clip where one of his bodyguards are talking about how his partner at the time fought back against him and had, I think, severed one of his veins. And that was one of the times I went to interview him. Anyway, as the trial started to go through, I was like, this is really weird, because this trial is really turning out to be more about kind of like domestic abuse than anything else. There were lots of allegations made against him, but the prosecution had the weakest case, the weakest actual case. Anyway, as a consequence, almost nothing panned out in that way. He's currently appealing his 50-month sentence, constantly filing motions. And alongside his criminal conviction, he faces dozens of civil lawsuits, because obviously once one lawsuit starts going, other people, and they may be genuine victims of him, but there are also people who are complicit. And a lot of it I had some problems with, because there were some women who were very much playing the victim, but actually they had used him because they wanted to be famous. And I've talked a lot about that It's not to re-victimize anybody. It's not to victim shame anybody. It's for us to be awake now. Parents must stop handing their children over to people who are famous just because they're famous. Young women and young males must stop cozying up to famous people just because they're famous, because that leads to all manner of abuse. We know enough now. We shouldn't be having reoccurrences of Me Too moments. We actually shouldn't. And there comes a point when it's very difficult to feel sympathy for somebody who was benefited in some way by getting a leg up the ladder, and then years later they claim to be the victim. It's difficult to be sympathetic of people like that. Because people like me, and I've never ever done anything like that, and I've been penalized, and lots of people who aren't prepared to sell out in that way are penalized. But it has been a very interesting time in terms of legalities. Famous British people have been charged. Obviously, you had Huw Edwards, the former BBC News presenter, who was handed a 6-month suspended prison sentence in September 2024 after pleading guilty to making indecent images of children. And we were all sick. We were all so sick of it, because at that same period of time is what I talked about earlier. The people who were being imprisoned for long terms for unrest because they were asking questions. But Huw Edwards and predators like him were getting away with these suspended sentences, and that continues to happen. And there are a number of very famous faces who are currently awaiting trial. Russell Brand is one of them. He faces a total of 7 criminal charges in the United Kingdom. The charges include 3 counts of rape, 3 counts of sexual assault, and 1 count of indecent assault. And the CPS authorized charges across 2 separate stages. And I think Brand's trial is October this year, I believe. It was set up for October this year. That can always remain open to change. Yes, it can. And the other person, of course, that has charges and is awaiting a trial is Tim Westwood. Tim Westwood faces 15 total criminal charges, including 4 counts of rape, 9 counts of indecent assault, and 2 counts of sexual assault involving 7 women. So Westwood formally entered not guilty pleas. Russell Brand has maintained he's not guilty. We shall see where it's going. But a situation has happened this last week, and that's why I'm concerned. And it's about British TV talent. And this is my question. When is the UK going to have its Me Too movement? And I say that because we saw what happened with Philip Schofield, right? Philip Schofield, who was eventually a major presenter for ITV for lots of shows, but primarily for This Morning. It's mid-morning show that I worked on for 10 years and did a ton of debates with Philip Schofield. Schofield. I always get it wrong between Schofield and Schofield, but Schofield, between Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby, his sidekick. And so ITV had all of that. And now we hear that it's something new seems to be going on. And I don't know if you're familiar with Benjamin Butterworth. Benjamin Butterworth is a TV debater like I was. And in fact, Benjamin and I have clashed before in TV debates, but he came out last week talking about another ITV predator and what he was revealing. And this was someone who had assaulted him and had also apparently sent inappropriate images to a child. And this had been reported to ITV executives, and they've done nothing. And this is about somebody who is employed by ITV. And so I said to Ben, you and I haven't always agreed, but on this, you are brave. This is brave. Shug has no idea who any of them are. Well, Benjamin Butterworth has been largely very like pro-trans, very much part of the LGBTQ agenda, which is why he and I have clashed. We clashed on one debate for Sky News where he was saying that people could be born in the wrong body. And I said, absolutely, they couldn't. But you see, the one thing that we agree on is we want predators out of TV. And so he is saying, this is ongoing now. I've told you, and this person is still on TV. And that is worrying. I'm doing a marathon, Ian. I am, but we are close to closing out, by the way. I'm doing a marathon, but this is really important and needs to be acknowledged. Absolutely needs to be acknowledged. So all power to you, Benjamin, and I've got your back and I know what's going on here. And yes, Stephen, all of those things. It's all hidden in plain sight, Miss Dizzy. And obviously, what else has happened over the last couple of years? The assisted dying bill failed. After months of arguing in Parliament and in the Lords, it was defeated. The main sponsor was Charlie Faulkner, a barrister and a Lord, and one-time flatmate of Tony Blair. The backbench MP pushing it alongside Esther Ranson was Kim Ledbetter. In the end, the Lords asked too many questions and deliberated so long and hard that it ran out of time, and Parliament is now in recess until the beginning of June. So for now, it's over, but they haven't given up. They haven't given up. A newly drawn private members bill will open the doors for MPs to potentially reintroduce the assisted dying bill, or they will use the Parliament Act to bypass future blocking by the House of Lords. So it's not over yet. And the other thing that happened, of course, was the suggestion that abortion was available up until birth. This is such an emotional subject, so wrongly portrayed in media. I didn't want to be part of that noise. I wanted to stand back and assess what was really being said. And the outline is that generally, no, abortion is not actually legal up to birth in the UK. In England, Wales and Scotland, the standard legal limit for an abortion is 24 weeks of pregnancy, and abortions after 24 weeks, which of course is insane, we are told can only be performed by registered medical professionals in very rare and strict circumstances. And that was very concerning for a number of my viewers, including Rachel. And Rachel wrote to me, and I've been waiting for the right time, Rachel, to read some of your email, because Rachel essentially exposed the lie of that. The idea that the only reason why they would terminate up to birth would be because a significant risk to the woman's life, a risk of grave physical or mental injury, a severe fetal abnormality. And Rachel, who has been on with us before, wrote, "Dear Sonia, as you know, I have some experience in this area, having worked for the National Down Syndrome Association when the non-invasive prenatal test, which is what this is operating under, first rolled out within the NHS. I volunteered as a parent speaker. In that role, I gave talks to medical professionals, primarily midwives, to encourage neutrality, especially during diagnosis, both pre and postnatal. I just want to clarify here that I am pro-choice. In fact, though I've been called upon by our local DS group over the years to greet new parents who have received a diagnosis of DS, I took on the role of parent speaker to tell our story of Louie's Down syndrome, because her son has Down syndrome, and she's been on to talk about Louie before." And she goes on to essentially say it's a lie about what they're saying about the reasons for late-term abortion. So this is what she said: "Late-term abortions are thankfully extremely rare, but it's a lie that they are only used for non-viable or severe fetal anomaly. And it's clear to me that some parents are railroaded into them. Also, I find it astonishing that this legal loophole has been closed, given that the NIPT is now available from 10 weeks on the NHS. This should give women an early indication that there is an anomaly, and so more time to decide, thus reducing the need for late abortions." And I think it's so important to get that sort of insight. And as Rachel pointed out, I can be pro-choice and also think that these late-term abortions are barbaric. And I hear you. Her son Louis was born at 31 weeks. She said he was a perfectly sentient little baby who needed minor interventions in the early days. At 40 weeks, you cannot argue that the baby is just a cluster of cells. And no, you cannot. No, you cannot at all. And so thank you for that, Rachel. Very important words and insight into what was going on. And what would 2 years of Wake Up be if it hadn't improved me in some way, eh? Carl wrote to me. Carl is lovely. He's one of my viewers and a supporter, but Carl was concerned about any negative comments about me under any of my videos. Carl is particularly concerned about people who claim to be disappointed with me. Carl felt that I should address the issue of people being disappointed with me because he felt their comments were divisive. This is what I wrote back to Carl. One of my favorite troll ploys, Carl. I think I've had 20 years of Sonia, you disappoint me. It's an emotional ploy to appeal to me and make it seem as if they supported me before this, whatever it was, thing that was said. They never did. I bet you these people who claim to be disappointed by me are never supporters of me. New levels, right? New levels, new devils. It's an old trick. But it is a regular thing. I actually answered a comment on Saturday with somebody who was doing an announce and flouts. They're like, I've always agreed with you, but after what you said I can't remember what it was. It was something to do with Harry and Meghan, where I said they've done very nicely despite playing victims. I've always agreed with you, but blah, blah, blah. I'm now going to have to unsub. And I thought, what a highly dramatic way to unsub. Just bloody unsub and get going. But I did thank them for being a viewer, but I'm not interested. I'm not interested, because the only thing is, and I have to say this to you, there's usually two reasons why people claim to be disappointed in me over the last 2 years. One, it's because I'm calling out racists, or two, it's because I'm calling out the Israeli lobby and the Zionists, right? And I'm going to tell you very clearly that I am also disappointed with me. I am disappointed with me because I didn't realize sooner what was going on in terms of Zionist infiltration into our country, because I somehow shied away from it until what was happening in the Middle East was right in my own country, and I could ignore it no more. I could no longer keep saying globalists or shills, any of those words, because I had to name the problem. And the problem is bankers and Zionists. And often they are the same people, and they also buy up racists. We see that. We've seen it. Okay, that is the reality. And they want to control us, and they want to control me. And sometimes they buy up people to come into my comments and talk about being disappointed. And that's just the way it goes. It's just the way it goes. My mitigating circumstances, by the way, of not realizing before how deep the infiltration has gone, is I've been so focused on the UK and the establishment corruption and child abuse. But sooner or later, you start to realize that it's all the same people doing it. So back to Carl, right? Don't worry when you see people saying they're disappointed in me. Their disappointment, I have discovered, is another person's opening, right? Somebody feels disappointed with me. Somebody's like, oh, I really like what she's saying. I've been doing this a long time. So a message to any of you, if you see negative stuff about me, don't worry about it. It's all part of the deal. It's part of the territory. So UK elections, we kind of started with Starmer to a certain degree, and we will end with him. Starmer is on his way out. He served his purposes for his masters, the controllers. We have a bunch of people vying for a place now. We have Wes Streeting, who I covered. We have Andy Burnham, who's going to be part of a by-election and hopes to become Labour leader and then Prime Minister. But there'll have to be election. You have like Angela Rayner, and almost all of them are tainted by Zionism and Mandelson. It's a toxic party. The handlers hope getting rid of Starmer will change things, but I doubt it very much. And it's also interesting that Starmer's new key advisor is, what was her name? Gray, who was given the job of the whole kind of lockdown party thing to do with Boris Johnson, made all of that go away. Do you remember? Anyway, so I get it. I do get it. Absolutely, Dave. I get it. I do now. And it's just taken me a while, but I'm here. I'm here. So, and of course, I've talked much about nature, redesigning my garden. I love both. And do you want to see a picture that I took last night in my garden? I'm going to show you it anyway. I'm very proud of it. I put up lights yesterday, solar lights yesterday, very simple ones. Nothing's difficult that I'm doing, but I'm going to show you my garden at night so far. It's not completed. It's not completed, Danielle, I should tell you, but this is the path at night. There it is, my little path that I've built, plants at the side and the little lights. And I just thought it looked very kind of almost Hobbit-ish. That's what I thought. And there you go. There it is. Jane can't wait to have a garden again. I'm absolutely loving it. I love it. All that fluff. I love it. My daughter came out to have a look at it and I was taking pictures and I thought, you know what? I'm going to have to show this to my wake up peeps tomorrow. So yes, I'm loving it so much. And it's so gratifying. It's a spiritual experience as well. It really is. So again, thank you all so much. I want to thank every single person who has donated to Wake Up. Some people prefer to remain private, and I'm happy for them to do so. But thank you anyway. Thank you to all of the wonderful people on the chat today. Thank you to Peter Folder. With the super chat today. Thank you so much to Peter Folder, to Randy, to Swiss Miss, to Cosmic, to Kath Hutton, to Connie, To Connie twice. Happy birthday. Thank you, Connie. You're an absolute star. To Donna Harlow, to Sticky Marks, you absolute darling. Happy wake up birthday. I was deleted from the interwebs for the second time 2 years ago. Why? Something I said? Probably. We love you, Sticky Marks. Thank you, Kath Monty, for your super sticker too. Thank you, Mark, and thank you for being here. I very much appreciate you all. You people are amazing. Thank you to Jade Torzik. Thank you to Hound Dog Shop. Thank you to Queenie 1984. So kind of like we are now at the end of our show. And what do I always do? I like to reflect. I like to make it more spiritual, more inward looking. So here we are 2 years on. I've taken on my own garden project. Garden is smelling great, by the way, going out there. And it is wonderful to see the flowers blooming. It reminds me of gardens from my childhood, you know, when school summer holidays entailed just many hours chasing butterflies in our garden. And I do feel today is a crucial turning point for Wake Up. The great thing about this process, as I said, is I'm in charge. I don't have to have a meeting with anyone about it. And I'm ready to make some changes and tweak us up a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. I feel very much that life has come full circle. In some respects, I've ended up where I started, right? Not right at the beginning, but with all of the things that we've gained over the last couple of years. And I've definitely grown as a person. I don't feel the need to have so many like confrontations and conflicts. Like when people used to say things about me before, I felt the need to defend myself, and I don't anymore. Because a lot of the time when people say bad things about me, people often know that the person saying the bad thing is the predator. And that's how far I've come. And that feels great. I don't have to defend myself anymore, not in the same way. And it just feels really good. And it feels really good having done today's show and kind of revisiting our roots and to a degree healing old wounds as well. And I really realized through Wake Up that what I've done is follow my calling in a way that I had never, ever done before. I think I mentioned this at the start. This is the first time ever I've been entirely funded by the public, and it feels magnificent. Thank you so much. And again, it is not only about funding, it's about being here, it's about showing up, it's about writing into me, it's about being in the live chat. Talking about the live chat, poor kids on Rumble, I always promised to come to you on the live chat, and I've been awful, haven't I? Hello, American First, and Crimson King. Oh, they're having an argument there. Well, see, they argue on Rumble just like they argue in the YouTube as well. Hello, Taffy Pat. Hello, Exposed in 2026. Oh, don't get me started about Nicki Minaj and Cardi B. The Front Porch Media, good morning to you all. Lovely to see you there. American First is now a monthly supporter. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you all so much for being here. So you're all wonderful. You've all made Wake Up what it is. I love you so much. I really do. And I just realized that all you ever have to do really is when you kind of know you're on the right path, you have to take the leap. And I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. I took the leap. You caught me. That includes every single person who has been involved in funding what we do around here. Thank you so very much. And I want to end on two quotes. One is from Dennis Waitley, who said, "Chase your passion, not your pension," which I love so much. And the other one, and I think it's very much what I've been about over the last 2 years. And thank you, all that fluff and stuff, for that super chat from Australia. You're a star. And I think this really sums up what I've been about, who I am, and what you expect from me. And that is, ask yourself what makes you come alive and do it. And that's Wake Up. Have a brilliant Monday, a brilliant bank holiday. If you are somewhere there is a bank holiday, I'm back out to the garden because the weather is amazing. And as I always say, I love you and I mean it, and I appreciate you greatly. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you on Friday. Lots of love to you all.